Hello. If you were looking for a scare tonight, you've come to the right place. I'll be narrating an hour's worth of creepy horror stories that I found off of Reddit. So without further ado,
These are their stories.
I saw the job listing 2 weeks ago. Wanted, night guard at West Market in Redacted, Pennsylvania. 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. shift, $21 per hour. The whole thing struck me as odd right off the bat. What kind of grocery store needed a security guard while it was closed? Was the crime really that bad? But I needed the money, badly. And 2 days later, after a phone interview with a man named Clive, I showed up for my first shift. As soon as I pulled up, I sort of understood why they needed a night guard. The grocery store sat at the edge of a rundown strip mall. Large signs reading "Space for Rent" hung in the store windows, but judging by the dusty glass and flickering street lamps, no one had taken them up on the offer in years. I parked near the front door, and as I approached the building, I saw a woman hurrying away from the store. "You must be Aaron," she said breathlessly. "The night guard?" "That's me. Clive left you some instructions. I put them on the conveyor belt at Register 1. She gave me a polite nod and then stepped around me, heading for the only other car in the parking lot. "Oh, thanks. Be friendly." My inner voice scolded, "She's your new co-worker." I turned around. "Hey, what's your name?" But she was already diving into the car. The door slammed, the car reeled out of the parking space, and then she was gone. So much for a new friend. I turned back towards the store. The parking lot was completely empty now, and the nearest streetlight was flickering with an odd, erratic rhythm. A cold wind swept in, whipping a crumpled paper bag across the parking lot. Well, here goes nothing. I stepped up to the store. The glass doors squeaked as they parted for me, and then I stepped inside. Despite its outward appearance, the store was actually pretty nice inside. Bright fluorescent lights shone from overhead. Jazzy music played from hidden speakers. I headed over to Register 1, where a folded piece of paper was waiting for me. I flipped it open and began to read. "Dear Aaron, welcome to the West family. We sincerely hope you enjoy your first shift. To help you, we've compiled a list of rules that should make your shift as easy as our fresh-baked apple pie. 1. As night guard, you are expected to patrol the store every half hour, making sure nothing is amiss. You may spend the rest of your time in the break room, at the back of the store, monitoring the security camera feeds. 2. Do not go down aisle 7. Do not look down aisle 7. 3. If you hear a knocking sound coming from within the freezers in the frozen food aisle, ignore it. 4. If you see a shopping cart that hasn't been put away, please return it to the shopping carts at the front of the store immediately. 5. Do not be alarmed if you find a pool of blood in the meat aisle. Sometimes our meat packages leak. Simply head to the storage closet, get the mop and bucket and clean it up. However, do not step in the puddle or touch it in any way. 6. If you see a woman in the store, immediately go to the break room and stay there until she leaves. Do not call the police or report a break-in. Do not make eye contact with her. 7. The music we play throughout the store is a pre-recorded disc of instrumental jazz. If the music ever stops, immediately go to the break room and stay there until it resumes. And 8. Do not, under any circumstances, end your shift early. Thank you so much, and again, I hope you enjoy your shift. Clive. I stared at the rules, rereading them slowly. They were so weird. A woman in the store, avoid aisle 7. I'd never been given instructions like this, even when I worked as a bouncer at a nightclub in a bad part of town. Maybe it was a test. They wanted to see how well I could follow instructions, no matter how absurd they were. I looked up at the security camera, staring down at me from the corner. Okay, challenge accepted. I glanced at my phone, 12:06. Might as well get my first patrol out of the way now, before getting settled in. It was odd walking through the store when it was so empty and quiet. All the breads and muffins had been stored away somewhere. White, opaque plastic had been pulled down over the vegetable display to keep the cold in. When I got to the end, I made a right into the meat section. Sheets of plastic had been pulled over the meat coolers too. I saw flashes of red through the gaps, of massive ribeye and sirloin steaks, big slabs of meat with the bones still intact. I averted my eyes. While I wasn't a vegetarian, I never really liked the sight of raw meat. I turned instead to the aisles. Aisle 3, pasta and sauces, all lined up on the shelves, glinting in the fluorescent light. Aisle 4, cookies and snacks. Aisle 5, aisle 6. Oh right, I wasn't supposed to look at aisle 7. I forced myself to look down at the floor. Yeah, it was stupid, but they told me not to look. In the off chance they were going to check the CCTV footage later to grade my performance, I was going to follow every rule. I continued further into the store. A few minutes minutes later, I found the break room, a nondescript brown door with a little square window cut into it. I took note of its location for later. As soon as I was done with this patrol, I was going to break out my laptop and finish watching Friday the 13th 4. And then I was at the west end of the store, the frozen section. I turned down the aisle, heading back towards the front. That's when I saw it. A shopping cart parked askew in the middle of the aisle. I huffed. Of all the rules, this was the one that annoyed me the most. I was hired to be a security guard, not a cleanup crew. Wasn't it the employee's job to put all the carts away at closing time? Sign. I began pushing it towards the front of the store. The wheels rolled smoothly underneath me. The jazz music played softly in my ears. I turned the corner and walked past the cash registers, heading towards the front door. That's when I heard it. A soft sound, barely audible over the jazz music. I stopped, straining my ears to listen. Several seconds of silence went by, and then I heard it again. It sounded like someone crying. The hairs on my neck stood on end. There's no one in here. The door's been locked the whole time. Unless a customer had accidentally stayed past closing time. Maybe that employee, the woman I'd run into in the parking lot, didn't notice them, and locked up before they could get out. "Who's there?" I called out, a wailing sob in response. My heart plummeted. It sounded like a woman, or possibly even a child. "I'm coming," I called, breaking into a run. "Where are you?" They didn't reply. They just kept sobbing. I frantically continued in the direction of the sound, calling out to them, telling them everything would be okay. But then I stopped dead. The sound, it was coming from aisle 7. Do not go down aisle 7. Do not look down aisle 7. The rules had been very clear about that. I stopped just short of the aisle, next to an end cap display of mayonnaise, and carefully positioned myself so I was hidden. "I'm going to help you," I called out. "Can you tell me what happened?" They finally spoke, but they didn't answer my question. Help me," the voice cried through more sobs. "But please." I wanted to step into the aisle. My foot was already halfway off the floor, ready to run in there and comfort them. But something stopped me. A gut instinct, a little alarm bell going off in my head. Because out of all the aisles, what were the chances this person would be in aisle 7? And besides, they were safe. They were in an empty store with me. It's not like they were in a dark alleyway in the middle of the night. "Come out of the aisle," I called, my voice shaking a little. "Then I'll be able to help you." "Please," the voice replied. "Help me. This is stupid. Clearly some person got stuck in here after closing time, and they're scared. Just go into the aisle and help them get home." But there was another part of my brain, the instinctual lizard brain part, and it was screaming at me to not move a muscle. "Do you need me to call someone?" I tried. "Your parents or family, the police?" "Help me," the voice pleaded again. The "help me," it sounded the same each time they said it. A little stutter at the beginning, an emphasis on me. It almost sounded like a recording or some AI generated thing looping over and over. It didn't sound natural. "Come out of the aisle," I shouted. "Come out and I'll help you." The sobs got louder, faster, hysterical. "Help me," the voice pleaded again in a desperate tone that made my stomach twist. I stood there, pressed against the mayonnaise display. Listening to them sob was making my stomach flip-flop, even if it did sound slightly unnatural. I could call the police, I thought. They'd know what to do. Except I'd left my cell phone with my backpack at cash register 1, and getting it would mean crossing aisle 7. The rules didn't say anything about walking past aisle 7. They just said I shouldn't go down it or look down it, and I couldn't just stand here and do nothing. What if it really was someone who needed help? A child who'd sprained their ankle and couldn't get up? "Don't worry, I'm getting my phone and calling the police," I called out. Then I took a deep breath and stepped across the threshold of aisle 7 towards register 1. As soon as I took a step, the crying stopped. Just like that, violent sobbing, and then, in an instant, nothing. Like a switch had flipped. Then the footsteps started. Loud, slapping footsteps of someone running down the aisle. Way too large to be a child. Coming straight at me. My heart dropped. It's a trap. They're coming for me and I'm probably gonna die here. But as soon as I made it across the aisle, the sound stopped. All I heard were the soft jazz tunes playing through the speakers overhead. I hightailed it to the break room, completely forgetting about the cart I was supposed to return. The break room was small and cramped. The little square window in the door had been blacked out with construction paper from the inside. The only source of light came from the computer screen on the desk, displaying the security camera feeds. I scrolled through the feeds. I quickly noticed that none of them offered coverage of aisle 7. It seemed like the cameras were intentionally placed to avoid that aisle. After searching the grainy black and white video for anything to miss, I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. When I finally opened them again, it was almost 12:30. Time for my next patrol. I didn't want to go. I felt safe here, locked up in this little room, but I also knew I wouldn't be safe if I didn't listen to the rules. I shuddered, imagining what would have happened to me if I'd gone down aisle 7, if I hadn't listened. I pulled myself out of the seat and headed for the door. The store was completely silent, no hysterical sobbing or pounding footsteps. I started my patrol near the back, walking up aisle 17. Cans of food glinted on the shelves as I passed, but when I glanced at them, I didn't see any labels I recognized. No chef ravioli or giant green men, just generically labeled cans of meat stew. In fact, all the aisle had was meat stew, the same cans over and over and over. I reached the end and turned right towards the front of the store, and that's when I realized that I had already broken one of the rules. The cart. I hadn't returned it. It wasn't where I left it. Instead of haphazardly parked near aisle 7, it sat next to one of the cash registers, like some ghost man was checking out his groceries. I paused for a second, hands hovering above the handle. Then I grabbed it and headed towards the door. Outside, the parking lot was pitch black, not a single street lamp. The shopping carts are only a few feet from the door, I told myself. Just go in and out, it'll take 2 seconds. I did it as quickly as possible. I ran into the darkness, slammed the shopping cart into the row, and dashed back inside. Then I shut the doors and clicked the lock. Okay, that wasn't too bad, I said to myself, letting out a sigh of relief. For a second, I reveled in the peace of the store, the silence, the safety of being locked inside with no one else with me. But then I stopped. The silence. Oh no, the jazz music wasn't playing. How long had it been off? I'd been so preoccupied with returning the cart, I wasn't even paying attention. I broke into a sprint towards the back of the store, cookies and snacks flashing by me. Then I swerved right and sprinted into the break room. I pulled out the list of rules and read them over again. Do not, under any circumstances, end your shift early. Why did he write that? Was it just because he didn't want anyone flaking out on him? Or if I left early, would some horrible fate befall me? Because I really wanted to leave. I opened my backpack, pulled out the soda I'd brought and popped it open, took a sip, scrolled through the security feed, 5 more hours. The next 4 patrols went fairly well. The rules didn't say how long they had to be, so every 30 minutes I sprinted a lap around the store as fast as I could. The whole thing only took about a minute. Then, for the other 29, I locked myself in the break room. On the second patrol, I heard knocking as I ran down the freezer aisle. It started as light tapping across the glass, then crescendoed into loud thumps, like someone was slamming their palms against the glass doors. As per the rules, I ignored it. I just kept running until I made it back to the break room. On the last patrol, the music had cut out again, so I quickly detoured and got to the break room as quickly as I could, the silence ringing in my ears. And now here I was in the break room with 3 hours left. I stared at my phone's clock, ticking slowly towards 3 a.m. I stood up, shaking out my nervous energy, preparing myself to sprint. I'd been a runner back in high school, but in the past 10 years I'd gotten way out of shape. The last patrol had left me panting and breathless, legs aching. My hand closed around the doorknob. My heart hammered in my chest. 3, 2, 1, go. I wrenched the door open and shot out into the store, but I didn't get very far because there was an enormous pool of blood on the floor. I froze, all the air sucked out of my lungs. I stared at the blood shining in the fluorescent lights. The rules said to clean it up, but that would take at least 10 minutes. I wasn't safe out here. I swallowed. Then I hurried to the supply closet, got a mop and a bucket, and started cleaning as fast as I could. The job was messy. I slid the mop through the blood, then dunked it in the bucket, rinsed and repeated, the soapy water-tinged red. A few times it splashed up and almost landed on me, but I did it. I cleaned it all up without touching a drop. Unfortunately, by the time I was finished, it was 3:27. Time for my next patrol. I was too tired to run, so I settled for a brisk walk around the store. I headed up through the frozen food. I noticed now there were handprints on the glass doors. Handprints of all sizes, tilted and smudged, except the proportions looked all wrong, with fingers that were too long, too thin. I averted my eyes and kept going. 2.5 more hours. My footsteps clicked against the tile floor. The jazz was starting to grate on my nerves. I must have heard the same looping saxophone melody 20 times now. It made me want to punch something. Sighing, I continued towards the produce section, briskly walking past the aisles. Then I stopped. Something caught my eye in one of the aisles. I backed up and took a better look. Someone was standing in aisle 9. A woman. She wore a blue linen dress and black high heels. Long black hair cascaded down her back, almost to her waist. She faced away from me, standing still, her thin white arms hanging resting limply at her sides. In her hand was a basket filled with cuts of raw meat. The rule echoed in my head: if you see a woman in the store, immediately go to the break room. Do not make eye contact with her. I slowly backed up as quietly as I possibly could. Then I started down the next aisle towards the break room. Click, click, click. I heard her footsteps echo against the tile. I hurried my pace towards the break room, but then I stopped. Her footsteps weren't coming from behind me. They were coming from in front of me. I averted my eyes to the floor, just as I saw two black high-heeled shoes step into the aisle. I stared at the floor. Do not make eye contact with her. Do not make eye contact with her. The words repeated over and over in my head, but I had to get to the break room and she was standing in my way. All I could see were her shiny, high-heeled shoes and the little drops of blood that leaked out of the meat packages in her basket, staining the floor. I backed up. That was the only way I could go. I kept my eyes on the floor, careful not to look up, but she was following me. Click, click. For every step I took, I saw a shiny black heel come into view, attached to a thin white calf extend, keeping time with me. I quickened my pace, so did she. Click, click, click. I wheeled around and broke into a sprint. Click, click, click. I ran down an aisle at random and sprinted towards the break room, but then halfway down the aisle I stopped. A shopping cart was parked across the middle of the aisle, blocking my way. Not just one cart, several of them, stacked up in a teetering tower that was nearly as tall as the aisles themselves. I was trapped. I backed away, my heart pounding. Click. Slow, methodical footsteps, coming towards me slowly like a cat stalking its prey. I took my chances. I turned around, sprinted back out into the open, and stepped into the next aisle. Oh no, I knew it instantly. A tattered lump of gray clothing and sickly, pale blue skin sat on the floor. The person, the creature, the thing folded in on itself in a pose reminiscent of a crying child, but it obviously wasn't anything resembling a human with its strange lumps and appendages and complete lack of head. I'd stepped into aisle 7. I immediately reversed direction, but not before the thing unfolded itself and began to move towards me. I whipped around and screaming sprinted down the next aisle. Miraculously, I made it to the end in one piece. I veered sharply left towards the break room. Almost there, almost there. My hand hit the doorknob. I wrenched it open and dove inside. Then I collapsed in the chair, panting. I sucked in a breath, staring at the locked door. Am I really safe in here? Technically, the rules never said I would be safe. Maybe staying in here only decreased my chance of death. I turned my attention to the security camera feed on the monitor. It showed the middle of the store, and from what I could see, the aisles were empty. No trace of the woman. I switched to the next feed. The produce section, empty. I switched to the next one. I jumped. She was standing right there, in front of the break room door. She stood so still the image could have been a photograph, except for the blood slowly dripping from the meat in her basket. I swallowed and glanced away from the monitor. At the door. My heart slammed into my ribs when I saw her shadow under the door. Go away, please go away, I pleaded in my mind. The shadow of her head in the window tilted, as if contemplating her next move. Now I knew why the window had been covered. I forced my eyes away and looked back at the screen. She was still standing there, except there was something different about the way she was standing. I squinted at the grainy black and white image, trying to figure out what was going on. When my eyes finally fell on her heels, I realized. They were facing forward, but I was still looking at the back of her head, at the long black hair cascading to her waist. Either her hair was hanging over her face, or she'd turned her head all the way around. It must have been 20 minutes before she began to walk away from the door. I couldn't tell if it was just the low frame rate of these crummy cameras, but her movements looked jerky, her body lurching with each step. It made me sick to watch. When she disappeared from the screen, I let out a breath of relief. My hands and legs were shaking, weak. Okay, think. The rules said to wait until she left. All I had to do was watch the feed by the front door. As soon as I saw her leave the store, I'd be safe. After a few minutes of sitting there, waiting for my heart rate to return to normal, I forced my fingers back to the keyboard. I pressed the arrow key to move to the next feed, then the next and the next, looking for the camera at the front of the store. Number, her face. Her face filled the entire screen. Her eyes filled me with horror. They were pure white. No pupils, no irises, just pure white eyes threaded with spidery veins. I screamed and jumped back. Then I shut my eyes. The rules said don't make eye contact. Did that count? Through the screen, I let out a terrified shuddering wail and covered my face with my hands. My entire body shaking. When I finally took a peek through my fingers, I saw her, rapidly scaling down the wall, away from the camera on the ceiling like some kind of spider. Then she pushed through the glass doors and disappeared into the night. She left. I was safe. Or as safe as I could be in this cursed grocery store. I glanced at the clock. 3:58 a.m. Time to patrol. I really didn't want to, but I forced myself to swing the door open and run as fast as I could through the store. I saw shopping carts stacked in teetering towers, heard hands pounding against the freezer doors, saw little spots of blood on the shiny tile from the woman as she'd stalked me, and then a minute later I was done. I locked myself in the break room and for the first time in years began to sob. The remaining patrols went by without incident, though I did hear more sobbing from aisle 7 and more banking from the freezers. And then the hour had come, 6 a.m. My heart soared at the sight of the pink dawn sky through the glass doors. I was safe, I was free. When I glanced out into the parking lot, I saw a few cars pulling in, disgruntled, groggy employees clutching coffees heading towards me. As soon as the first one came in, I flew out of the store, ran to my car, and got out of there as fast as I could. I had never felt such relief, such happiness. I felt like a new man. All of my problems, even my financial ones, seemed dwarfed by what I just endured. When I pulled onto the main road, I rolled down my windows and flicked on the radio. But it wasn't my usual classic rock station that blared through the speakers. Instead, I heard the upbeat tune of a saxophone. And as I listened to that horrible loopy melody, I realized that my days as a night guard for West Market may not be over yet. I can barely remember what life was like before we found the game that June night. We were 6 high school kids bored out of our minds, trying our best to fill the void. Most of us had part-time summer jobs, but we were hesitant to spend money on anything. We all hoped to save for college. After what felt like hours going back and forth on deciding what to do for the day, we took a walk around our suburban neighborhood. It was the end of a yard sale day and most people were packing up and heading inside. A few people still remained outside eager to sell. We didn't really have the intention to buy anything, but I still combed through the last pieces of used crap people set out. I always think I'm going to find some kind of amazing treasure, but always end up questioning my purchases hours later. I found myself digging through a shoebox full of old board games. I thought I might be able to find a new game for all of us to play. I also figured since it was the end of the day, I might get it for super cheap. At first, I only saw games that looked in too bad of shape to even buy. That, or it was a game I knew my friends wouldn't want to play. I've always been a board game fan, but not so much my friends. I had to beg them for months to play D&D with me, and they were only willing to play it for my birthday. I'm always trying to find new games that might interest them. I was ready to give up, but then I saw a game at the bottom that I'd never heard of. Tasks with Friends with the tagline, "The game you and your friends will never want to put down." The box looked colorful and pretty worn out, but not so bad that we couldn't play with it. It just looked well loved. I tried to open it up, but the sides were taped down. I mean, it makes sense. You don't want all the pieces to come flying out after all. I didn't see a price tag or sign for the price, so I found the owner and asked her, "Excuse me, how much are you charging for the game?" I said eagerly to the woman while admiring the bright colored box that lacked any company branding or trademarking. "Oh, that old thing. I don't know. Do you have $1 on you?" The woman said as she put the yard sale leftovers into one big box. As she told me the price, I perked up and started to dig through my purse. She either got annoyed with me taking too long or just wanted to be nice and told me to just take it. She immediately started to back up her box again. "So, is the game any fun?" I said to her awkwardly. "I actually never played it. My friend Jen gave it to me a few years back because her kids got obsessed over it or something, so she just wanted to get rid of it. She thought my family would enjoy it, but we just never got around to playing it," she said with her back facing me. I kindly thanked her and called for my friends to come over to see what I got. As I called for them, I could see their curiosity over what I found. That excitement was quickly lost when they saw I had a board game in my hands. They rolled their eyes knowing that I would try and get them to play it with me. "Kate, you know we don't do the board game thing," Aaron said to me annoyed. "Come on guys, you've all been going on and on all day about how bored you are. At least try. This game looks really fun. I actually haven't played this one before, so we can all learn together," I said as I saw their faces start to grow curious again. again. James came up to me and gestured at the box in my hand. I gave it over to him, hoping that he would be convinced to play after looking at it. I knew if he was down to play, everyone else would be too. As he held the box, I could see the expression on his face change from doubt to excitement. "This game looks like fun, let's go play," he said with a giddy tone I'd never heard him use. He started to jog in the direction of his house with me close behind and the rest of our friends slowly walking behind me, looking confused as to why James was so excited to play a board game when he was normally the person most against them. We all made it back to James's house. We walked in and were greeted by his mom, confused as to what made her emotionless son so excited. As we stood in the entryway not sure what to say, we heard him calling us from the basement. We ran down the steps to see the game fully set up on the floor and ready to play. He was sitting on a pillow reading the instructions with intense concentration. "James, are we actually playing this game?" Bree whined. "Yes we are, I promise. If you just sit down and start to play, you will have fun. I had a chance to learn the rules while you guys got here," James insisted as he shuffled a pile of cards one last time. After a few minutes of back and forth, everyone was sitting down and ready to play. James explained the rules of the game directly from the intrusion manual. Each player starts with their token at the start of the board. Players will take turns drawing a card from the top of the deck. Each card will have a task. If that task is completed, you may move the number of spaces that are specified on the card. Once you see the card, it will say secret or public at the top. If it's a secret card, do not read it out loud. This task must be completed without anyone noticing or questioning the action on the card. For example, hold someone's hand, sing a song, insult someone, etc. Just complete the task without anyone calling you out. If a player does something you believe to be a secret task, say out loud, "Deceiver." If the player was caught, they will show their card and fail their task. Do not move any pieces. If the person who calls out "Deceiver" wrongly accuses the player, then they must move back one space. The accused player will keep that card and continue to try and complete the task. Once you have successfully completed a secret task, you may announce task complete and move your token forward as many spaces as specified on your task card. If you pull a public card, you must read it out loud. These cards will include things like saying the alphabet backwards, don't say or until your next turn, singing a karaoke song, playing dead for 1 minute, etc. Some cards have time limits and specific instructions. Every card will clearly state the task. The player who gets their token to the end of the board wins. The game will start with the player who lied last drawing a card. Take turns drawing one card at a time, with the person to your right going next. Have fun. James folded the paper instructions up and sat them by his side, asking if anyone had questions. No one said anything. It seemed like they all understood the game fine. Or maybe they just didn't care yet. "Alright, let's get the game started," James proclaimed, but was met with blank stares. "Come on guys, I just read the rules. You should know how the game starts. We have to start with who lied last." Everyone remained silent. No one wanted to say their last lie. "This is so dumb, I guess I'll go. I told my mom that Henry wasn't hanging out with us when I left the house. There, I'll go first," Bree blurted out as she leaned forward to grab a card. As she looked at it, she rolled her eyes. "This is so dumb. Why are we playing this game?" "Come on, Bree, it can't be that bad. Can you read it out loud?" Henry said, sensing that the card was embarrassing. "Ugh, public card. Pretend to be a cow for 3 minutes." She threw the card down and looked at Henry, who was to her right, expecting her turn to just be over and not wanting to even try. The rest of the group started to laugh and encourage her, chanting her name and begging her to do it. After about a minute, she gave in and got down on her hands and knees. When she first started, she was annoyed, staring daggers at Henry. As her time ran down, I could see in her face her feelings towards the game change. When the timer went off, she didn't stop for a few seconds. She kept going because she was laughing so hard. "That was so fun. Someone move my token up one space. Henry, it's your turn now," Bree said with a giggle and a newfound excitement. Henry looked at her in disbelief. He was so used to her cold exterior but liked that this game made it melt away. Henry picked up his card. He motioned, zipping his lips shut, and shook his head. Me, Bree, and James all squealed in excitement, with the rest of the group looking lost, not understanding what they missed that got us so excited. Since Henry had a secret card, it was AJ's turn. Aaron. She was chuckling along but clearly just doing it because she didn't want to look dumb for asking us what was so funny. She pulled her card and read it out loud. It's a public card, she said with a dry tone, trying to gauge the room and observe everyone else as they celebrated her public card. It says I have to do jumping jacks until my next turn. As she stood up, everyone in the room cheered her on except for Aaron. As she got to her feet, she paused and looked over at Aaron. I can imagine he felt like the only sane person in the room and wasn't sure what was going on. After a second of hesitation, she started her jumping jacks. Aaron looked around at us, eyeing him down desperately, waiting for him to read his card. By the time he finally picked up his card, AJ had started to laugh while doing her jumping jacks. Sorry, it's a secret card, Aaron said nervously as everyone wiggled with happiness. Well, looks like it's my turn, I said as I leaned forward but was cut off by Henry quickly standing to his feet and lunging towards AJ, tackling her to the ground, interrupting her jumping jacks and making a loud thump as they hit the ground. Henry, what the hell are you doing? What's wrong with you? Aaron yelled in a serious tone that turned into him trying not to laugh by the end of the sentence. I'm calling a deceiver on that tackle, Henry, Bree stated with a laugh. Okay, you got me, Henry said while still laying on AJ from his tackle. They both smiled over the event even though it clearly hurt when they hit the floor. But you have to admit that one was tricky. I tried to start my turn again but was interrupted by Aaron. Ha, task completed. I yelled at Henry and didn't get caught. I get to move 2 spaces, he said as he smugly moved his token 2 spaces on the game board. We kept playing the game for hours. We finished the first game and everyone wanted to play again, and again, and again. I looked around at them in disbelief. It felt impossible that all my friends were enjoying a board game. It was a dream come true. After years of begging, finally. Normally at hangouts like this by 10 p.m., Bree and Henry would wander off to make out in some closet, AJ goes home to sleep, and Aaron, James, and I are left to awkwardly try and find something to do with just the 3 of us. It got to be 2 a.m. and we were either exhausted or our parents calling us telling us to come home, or we would be in serious trouble. We all went back to our houses but all had a hard time going to sleep. We stayed up until 5 a.m. for some of us, just talking about the game over text, strategies when we could play again, funny things that happened that night. We couldn't get enough. The games we played started out pretty simple. No tasks got too wild, and while we really loved to play, it wasn't like it was taking over our whole lives. Not yet at least. Because we played the game at James's house the first time, we ended up just keeping it there. Even though the game was technically mine, we always hung out at his place, so it just made sense. It was around 10 a.m. the next day when our group chat started to blow up with everyone asking when we could get together that day. Now, because it was summertime and we were all teenagers, we either had work in the mornings or most of us slept until noon. But not me. I was always up early waiting for my friends to get up so I had something to do, or trying to make some money as a dog walker. That being said, I was shocked when I saw that everyone was up and everyone claimed to not have work. James didn't have a job at that point, so of course he was free, but everyone else was too. That did not happen often. We all met up at James's place at around 11 a.m. that same day, everyone eager to play. We must have played 10 games that day. The games consisted of us doing accents, being banned from saying certain words, backflips, and so on. Nothing too weird. We realized after a few games that we never got a repeating card, not one time. This was strange because there were probably 200 cards in the deck, but even with us playing a dozen games, every card was new. I knew I had a couple of dogs to walk that evening, but texted the owners to cancel. No way was I going to leave while all my friends were enjoying a board game this much. I knew AJ said something about her having a shift at 4 p.m., but when the time got close, she went to the other side of the room and called out of work. She didn't even mention it to us or talk about it. She just stood up, walked to the corner, talked to her manager, and came back. No one thought anything of it. After a few minutes, she loudly proclaimed, "Task completed," moving her token up 3 spaces. We looked around confused at what task she had, and the card said, "Call out sick to work." We were surprised by this card, to say the least. It was the first time a card had to do with something outside of the players. Everyone else in the group canceled any plans they had for the rest of the day, although AJ was the only person who completed a task for it. It was around 11 p.m., which made it a full 12 hours of the game. Bree pointed out that we forgot to eat any food all day. After thinking about it, I realized that I hardly barely drank any water, and went to the bathroom like one time all day. Things started to get out of hand that night. AJ pulled a card that said to go into a closet with the player to her left and kiss them for 5 minutes. Of course, that player was Henry. Bree was not happy, but she knew how serious everyone was about the game. She told him she wasn't okay with it, but he insisted that it was just a game and it wouldn't mean anything. It was worth 4 points for both people who would go into the closet. AJ and Henry stood up and went to find a suitable space, all while Bree freaked out and said she would end things with Henry if he went through with it. It was never completely clear what Henry and Bree were. They don't like to use boyfriend and girlfriend, but everyone knew they were a thing. Aaron tried to call it off, saying this wouldn't be worth it and to just stop, but it was like they didn't even hesitate. Bree sat on the carpet and started to cry as the timer on her phone counted down an agonizing 5 minutes. I thought I would either hear kissing or nothing at all, but instead I heard talking. It started as soft whispers, then crying and yelling. They stayed in for about 2 minutes, then came tumbling out. "That's it, Henry. I can't believe you would do that for a game. We are over," Bree said with a red, wet face. Henry came and silently sat down with AJ. AJ was now beet red as well. Despite 3 of my friends just going through something I couldn't wrap my head around, they all looked at James calmly and nodded for him to pull his card. No one had moved any tokens forward, so it was clear they failed their task of kissing in the closet. James hesitantly leaned in for a card and read it to himself as we were bombarded by Bree, AJ, and Henry all saying, "Task completed," and then shot confused faces at each other. They all threw down their cards and moved their tokens forward. Bree's card said break up with Henry. Henry's card said make AJ cry, and AJ's card said tell Henry you love him. All those cards were worth way more than the stupid kissing card, so the kissing task was ignored and they all individually completed their hour tasks without ever communicating it with each other. They all saw opportunities to complete a task worth more points and they took it. After this moment, it was like nothing even happened. The girls stopped crying and started laughing and saying how impressive the completion of the tasks were. "Wait guys, something is wrong here. Do you not see it?" Aaron said with concern, trying to take a break from the game. "Oh, stop. You are just jealous you didn't get to move 6 spaces," Bree said with arrogance. "No, I'm not talking about that. Does no one find it weird that the cards are using our names now? Not only that, but the cards are somehow interacting with other cards to almost try and make bad things happen," James blurted. As he said that, it was like we all froze in our spots, all looking at each other, realizing how hungry and tired we were, looking around at the room, seeing how big of a mess we made. Bree grabbing Henry's hand with a look of sadness and coming to grips with how they hurt each other for a game. I looked down at my arm and was reminded of the crud things I had drawn on my arm with Sharpies in order to move 1 space in an earlier game. I saw Aaron's jeans that were now cut into shorts with some kid scissors. I looked at James's legs and saw his one shaved leg lying crossed over the untouched hairy one. I looked at AJ and saw she had a huge purple bruise on her arm. At that moment, I remembered feeling like an addict trying to get off drugs. I knew this game was hurting us. I wanted to stop but felt like I couldn't. I could see the same feeling in all my friends' eyes too. The urge to say one more game, just one more time, just to feel the high of this dumb game again. I think we need to take a break from this game, guys. It's getting kind of weird and out of hand," I murmured with the strength that I somehow mustered up. It was like telling an alcoholic you were taking away their beer. They all looked horrified at the idea of not playing the game for even a moment. Just then, James's mom came downstairs and was horrified at what she was looking at. 6 disheveled teenagers all sitting in a circle looking like they had all just been through a war. Not only that, but her whole basement was a mess. "James, what the hell happened to your leg? Are you all playing that dumb game again? I can't believe this. Everyone out of my house. James, you are grounded," his mom shouted with rage in her voice. We all ran out of his house, not saying a word to each other, just trying to get home and get some food. As I sat in my kitchen with my long sleeve sweatshirt covering my now inked up arm, I tried to eat a sandwich I made myself. I was starving. I could feel and hear my stomach growling, but my need to play the game was so much stronger. So strong I didn't even want to eat. I sat at my dining room table staring at that sandwich for what felt like an eternity, telling myself that I needed to eat and I'd feel better if I did, but somehow the thought of the game was taking up all my energy. I was holding back the urge to text my friends. It took every ounce of self-control I had left. I felt my phone buzz in my pocket and I involuntarily grabbed my phone so fast it was in my hand before I could even think about it. It was James in our group chat. "Hey guys, so do you think that was a long enough break? I think I can find where my mom put the game game and bring it to that old treehouse back behind Mr. Baker's house. I couldn't hold back anymore, I had to play again. Before I knew it, I was sneaking out of my house trying to remember where the old treehouse was. As I ran through the neighborhood, my phone lit up with texts from my friends saying they were on their way. After running around for a while, I found the treehouse. I couldn't believe I had such a hard time finding it considering how much time a few of us used to spend in it during middle school. I could hear all their voices sounding annoyed as I was the last one to get there. I climbed up the old wooden ladder to find all my friends sitting in a perfect circle, barely able to see the board or each other. It was around this time something strange happened within the game. It wasn't about winning the game necessarily, it was about playing as many games as possible and completing as many tasks as we could. If anyone won a game or finished a task, everyone felt a high, not just the winner. Because of this, players stopped calling each other out for trying to complete secret tasks, so people stopped being so secretive to complete secret tasks. They still kept them a secret because it was a rule of the game, just no one called them out. This made us all more ruthless. I sat down on the hardwood in between Bree and James. Our next game began. AJ drew a card first and it was a secret card. She didn't seem giddy, she looked flushed and scared. In fact, it felt like the mood had shifted with everyone. We weren't laughing our butts off anymore, we were terrified to stop playing. It was something in our guts that made us have to play, like a virus growing in us, desperately trying to get out. Next, Aaron drew a card and read it out loud. Hold your breath for 5 minutes, he whispered with confusion. How am I supposed to do that, he said, trying to not get worried. It's not that the card was all that bad, it's that he knew he would stop at nothing to make it happen. He told us to keep playing the game while he did it and got a timer up on his phone. He took a few deep breaths, then held his nose shut and became extremely focused, not making eye contact with anyone. Next, it was James's turn. He had a secret card and didn't show much emotion towards it. Next, Bree nervously took a card and yet again, it was a secret card. In fact, we all drew a secret card until it was Aaron's turn again. It had been about 45 seconds and he was really focusing and we didn't want to make him draw a card while trying to finish his task. As we sat and watched our friend become more and more red from holding his breath, we found ourselves in complete silence. Other than the wind weaving its way through the trees outside and the soft sound of crickets in the distance, we all just stared at each other, terrified of what was on those secret cards. I knew I had to use every little bit of self-control I had left in my body to not try and complete the task on my card. I was betting that's why everyone was being so quiet. They all had tasks that they didn't want to do but felt the uncontrollable urge to do it. My card said that I needed to remove one of James's fingers by any means necessary. It was worth 10 points. I couldn't believe I wanted to complete it so badly, but I was frozen figuring out how to do it. As I stared at him, I noticed he was looking over at Bree. I figured that his card had something to do with her. It seemed like everyone was fixated on someone else. I glanced down at the timer Aaron had and I was amazed to see he had been holding his breath for almost 2 minutes. Just as I was about to comment on it, chaos broke loose, everyone jumping onto someone else, making it one big pile of people viciously grabbing each other. I didn't read their cards myself, but it was clear by their actions what their tasks were. Of course, as you know, I was going for James's fingers, but James's was ripping at Bree's ear, Bree was pulling Henry's hair out, Henry was tearing at AJ's neck, and AJ was trying to open my mouth to get my tongue. For a solid 30 seconds, we were all attaching each other when Aaron passed out from holding his breath. This seemed to snap us out of our trance for a bit. We ran over to our friend and checked his pulse. After we realized he was still breathing, we got lost in the game again and all jumped on each other to keep brutalizing one another. Just as I got my teeth around James's pinky finger, we saw a bright flashlight coming through the cracks in the treehouse and froze. A police officer popped his head through the bottom entrance to the treehouse and looked at us in horror. He saw Aaron out cold in the corner alone with the rest of us in a pile of blood and ripped out hair. The officer grabbed us one by one and practically threw us to the ground where another officer put us each in handcuffs. We had hours and hours of questioning that night, but we were all released by sunrise. No one was badly injured, just a lot of cuts, bruises, and a few patches of hair missing. Even Aaron was okay. Honestly, Aaron made it out in the best shape. We all got grounded for the rest of the summer. All the parents agreed that we needed to stop spending time together because they insisted on us having some beef between us all. None of us mentioned the board game was at the treehouse that night because we didn't want them to take it away from us. We knew we had to play it again. However, they caught on to it and banned us from ever playing it again. We spent the next 3 weeks of summer miserable. Each one of us tried to fill the hunger to play the game by playing other board games or attempting to remake it, but it wasn't the same. It was the night before school started and I got a message from James through Skype. Our parents banned us from talking to each other brother, but it seemed my parents and James's parents forgot about Skype. He told me I had to come over right now. I managed to hop out my window and ran for James's house. I got to his house in what felt like record time and jumped down the fire escape to the basement. There I saw the rest of my friends all sitting by the fireplace weeping. As I got closer, I saw they were covered in ash. I saw tiny little bits of what was left of the game lying out on the ground. She burned it, my mom burned it, James said in between tears. Everyone was desperately trying to find any pieces that were left of our precious game. Some of them rubbed the ashes of the game on their faces and arms to try and feel something again. As I watched them, I saw something in the corner of my eye. I looked over to our normal hangout area and saw it. I saw the board game sitting out, not just the box, but the whole game was out and ready to play. Are you sure that your mom burnt it, James? I said as my eyes got glazed over looking at the beautiful board game sitting out for us to enjoy. Yes, I'm sure. She did it right in front of me, so I'd stop looking for it. Just as James finished his sentence, he looked at me and then at my eyeline. He saw the game. The next week of our lives was a whirlwind. After James's mom burned the game and it reappeared, we all ran away with the game. We stole a car from AJ's mom after we got a task card for it and left town. We would play the game in the car, in random fast food restaurants, and sometimes in parks. It's all we did all day. We would fall asleep playing the game and only manage to eat maybe a bag of chips or something small during the day. We kept moving because we didn't want to be found. In that week, we all managed to lose our jobs and all missed the first week of our senior year of high school, all because we were addicted to a board game. I still remember the last game we ever played. It was a late Sunday night. We were actually in our town sitting in an old barn near the treehouse we sat in before, all because the board game told us to. Up to that point, we were hanging out far away from home. We didn't want to be so close. We knew we could be found easily by our families and the authorities if we were too close, but we had no choice. We were slaves to the game. At this point, we were in bad shape. With every new game started, we broke down a little bit more. We surrounded the board with tired eyes and growling stomachs, missing teeth and bruised bodies, concussed heads and broken toes. Please, we have to stop. I can't do it anymore. I want to go home, Bree said as we were about to start our next game. I can't imagine not playing this game. It's all I ever want to do. I think I might die if I couldn't play it. I know the game hurts us, but it would hurt so much more if we stopped playing it, Henry said with a gravelly voice. Guys, why are we talking? We have to play again, Aaron said while trying not to cough. I know we have to. I've never hated something and loved something so much in my whole life, Bree remarked. We started the game with shaky hands, moving slowly and holding our breath whenever someone looked at their card. OJ went first. She reached down and picked a card, cringing to herself after reading it in her head. Next was Bree. She rolled her eyes and she read off the words. Public card, waterboard the player to your right for 5 minutes. Both players move 8 spaces, Bree timidly said as she glanced at James sitting next to her. I can't say we really knew how to waterboard someone, but we laid him on his back with his legs elevated and dripped water over him. We let him take a card for his turn before Bree started the waterboarding so we didn't have to wait for 5 minutes for them to be done. His card was a secret card. We continued the game with the awful background sounds of gagging and choking. Next, it was Aaron's turn. He read his card and winced. He closed his eyes tight and opened them again, as if he was hoping he was in a dream. As he opened his eyes, he slowly looked at all of us, making eye contact with each one of us. Just then, James was done being waterboarded and he and Bree came to join us. I was so glad they were done, not just because I was sick of the sounds, but because it meant they got to move 8 spaces. Aaron stood to his feet slowly. I prepared myself because I figured he was about to hurt us. In an instant, he ran out of the barn and into our stolen car. We all looked around confused as to where we went, but kept playing the game as he drove off. Next, it was my turn. Public card, jump off the roof of the barn, 9 points. I said out loud nervously. Henry and AJ jumped up and started to walk outside, not even questioning if I would do it or not. They weren't wrong in the assumption. Before I could even think I was on my feet trying to find a way up to the roof, I found my way to the top of the 10-foot tall building. I took a deep breath and leaped off and was met with a hard thump as I hit the ground. I felt a gut-wrenching pain in my right ankle as I landed. I knew I broke it. I had no doubt in my mind. I was thrashing in pain, grabbing my ankle as my friends dragged me back into the barn. We knew we had to keep playing. Next, Henry took a card. He picked it from the pile with his eyes closed and brought it to his face while peeking just enough to see the words on the card, then closed his eyes again trying to pretend he never read the words in the first place. Next, AJ took a card. Even though it was a secret card, I knew it was about me. She glanced down at my ankle right after her eyes left the card. Just as James was reaching for his card, we saw Aaron walk back into the barn. We all sat in shock as his silhouette became clear and vivid in the doorway. Blood trickled down his arms and hands, dripping on the dirt as we all stared at each other. His eyes were blank at first, but then turned to pain. We watched him as he walked from the doorway to the game board, blood dripping on the game as he moved his token 30 spaces. Aaron, what have you done? 30 spaces, AJ muttered in fear. James, I'm so sorry I had to. Aaron whimpered as sat in the dirt with his secret task card crinkled in his bloodied fist. Tell me what you did right now. What the hell does your card say? Show us, James yelled as he stood to his feet. Just as James was about to jump onto Aaron, Henry reached into his pocket and pulled out some matches we used to start small campfires while we had been on the run. We all stood still waiting to see what he was about to do as he lit 3 matches and threw them into the nearby hay bales, igniting the whole inside of the barn. Without hesitation, AJ saw the opportunity and stomped on my ankle as hard as she could. If it wasn't broken before, it sure was now. I looked down at it to see it now bent sideways. She then stomped on my other ankle, not breaking it but making it so I couldn't walk. She moved her token 12 spaces. Even though I was in agony from the pain, I still felt such an intense high from her moving so many spaces. Aaron dropped his card in the midst of everything happening. James fell to his feet to see the card and started to weep as he read it out loud. Secret card, kill James's mom, move 30 spaces, he said with anger bubbling up. I can't believe you would do that for a dumb game. How could you do this to me? I couldn't control myself. Come on, you know what I mean. I couldn't control myself. Don't do anything you will regret, Aaron said cautiously. Oh, I think it's a little too late for not doing things we regret, James said as he jumped onto Aaron, choking him with all his strength. It seemed at that moment he was able to break free from the control of the game. He wasn't feeling the high of someone else completing a task. He just felt hate, red hot hate. I was overwhelmed to say the least. The barn was in flames. James was trying to kill Aaron, and to make matters worse, AJ out of nowhere jumped up and dug a pocket knife into Bree's stomach. Now Bree and AJ were in a fighting match too. Henry and I sat across from each other in disbelief at our surroundings. He looked at me with death in his eyes as he reached for a card. It wasn't even his turn, but I don't think he cared anymore. He knew the others would be occupied for a while. The fire was getting bad. I knew I had to get out of that barn as soon as I could. Because of the damage done to my ankles, I couldn't walk, so I dragged my body out of the barn, taking the game with me. I made it a few feet and looked back to see Henry not moving. He set his card down on the board before I started to drag it with me, and I read it as I continued to crawl. Secret card, let the fire overtake you. Move your token to the finish line and win the game. I was able to get out of the barn with the board game in hand. I sat and watched as the flames overtook Henry. He didn't even flinch when he caught on fire. As I saw it happen, I moved his token to the end space so he could win the game. I felt an intense high overtake my body as the game was complete. Only a few moments after Henry caught fire, the whole barn came down, with all my friends in it. I looked at the burning barn and then back down at the game. I'm ashamed to say that my biggest worry was not knowing who I play with now. I hate myself for thinking that, but that's how all the game is. I tried to start a new game by myself and drew a card, but that's when I saw the sirens of police cars and fire trucks pull up next to me. I was immediately surrounded by people trying to give me medical attention, taking me away from my game. I scratched and threw my body around like a toddler not getting their way. I remember them giving me some kind of sedative and waking up in the hospital. I was the only person to make it out alive that night. All I could say to the doctors and my parents was that I needed the game, that I had to play the game. It was the only meaning to life. It was the only reason I had to live. My parents got me a great lawyer, and I got out of everything by pleading insanity. Our families all knew the right people and had the right money to ensure the word never got out about the deaths. They even managed to make the death of James's mom disappear. When they told me my friends were all dead, I didn't have much of a reaction. I just kept asking where the game was. When they eventually told me the game and was gone and never coming back, that's when I lost it. They had to put me into restraints because I kept hurting the hospital staff from my meltdowns. I started to threaten the staff and told them all the horrible things that would happen to them if they didn't get that game back to me. I eventually ended up in a psychiatric hospital. I yelled and screamed so much that I never had my voice. I hardly ever slept because all I thought about was the game and how I craved to play it again. My skin was red and torn up from my insistent picking due to the withdrawals. After months I felt numb. Maybe from all the drugs they pumped me up with, or perhaps I was so used to the withdrawals I didn't feel it as much. It still felt like I had an uncontrollable urge inside my bones, but I was able to hide it. They then sent me home after a while. I knew I had to mask my emotions for the game, pretend I didn't care anymore, even if it killed me inside to say it out loud. I walked into my bedroom and I felt like I was being treated like a baby. My old bed frame was gone and it was just the mattress on the floor. All my sharp shelves were taken down, along with anything else I could possibly hurt myself with. I rolled my eyes but knew my parents had to make these changes for me to even come home. I sat on my bed and I looked around at my room, now with a doorknob that locked from the outside to keep me in, as well as bars on my windows. I searched my room desperately to find something to take up my mind. That's when I dug through my closet and I saw it. I saw that beautiful, colorful box that I came to know so well, just hiding in the back of my closet waiting to be found. I knew it came back the first time it was destroyed, but it was feeling like it was a one-time thing. But here it was, patiently waiting for me to come and play it. I ripped open the box, giving myself a paper cut in the process, and started to play the game by myself. With all that being said, I can finally say task completed and share what my first card said in that solo game. Secret card: spread the word about this game online so more people can join us. Move 20 spaces. So what do you say? Care to come join me for a game? I've lived with the voice for 11 years now. 11 years since I first heard the pained whispers drift up from the back of my mind. 11 years since the accident. I don't remember much from before the wreck. Probably about the same amount any person does from their first 7 years of life. But I do recall every detail of the day that everything changed for me. Maybe the trauma of it all seared it into my memories. My mother was driving me home from soccer practice and some of her hair was draped over the back of the headrest. I was seated behind her, and when she refused to stop for ice cream, I grabbed a handful of the blonde strands and tugged hard. Distracted for a moment by the sudden pain in her scalp and turning to yell at me, she ran a red light. I'll never forget the look of terror on the young woman's face in the other car as she was about to T-bone us, nor her screaming expression turning towards the back seat just before the collision. My father was on the board of the highest rated hospital in the city, and he ensured that we received the best surgeons and the best treatment. The passengers in the other vehicle, a young mother and her son, were not so lucky. Still, it was a miracle that I survived. The impact was right behind our car's driver's door, right where I was sitting. I should have been crushed, but I did not emerge completely unscathed from the incident. My face was shredded by broken glass and twisted metal, my larynx battered to permanently alter my voice, my eyes damaged such that I was declared legally blind, though losing the majority of my sight was probably for the best, as I was unrecognizable. With extremely powerful glasses, I was able to see just enough of my reflection to recoil in horror the only time that I ever felt brave enough to look into the mirror with them on. My parents found me sobbing in the restroom and calling myself a monster that morning. A few days later, they told me that we were moving away, that they were wanting to avoid me having to return to school and the onslaught of difficult questions or cruel ridicule from the children that knew me before. Clear across the country, we went from west coast to east, leaving everything behind, including all the photographs of me taken prior to the accident, which my mother and father explained they did as a kindness, to avoid any reminders of how I used to look. We were starting a new life, and they seemed intent on addressing the accident and my disfigurement from it as little as possible. In fact, it seemed at times that they wanted to pretend that it never happened. My mother sustained some superficial damage as well, but she became expertly adept at hiding her scars with makeup, and both of my parents refused to elaborate to anyone that inquired about my injuries other than to say we were in a car wreck, that I was a perfectly normal little boy whose physical wounds shouldn't define him, and that they would discuss it no further. Often, I appreciated their attitude as they worked fiercely to ensure that my childhood was no different than any other, but there were days that I wished they would at least be willing to talk to me about it. Like the night that I first heard the voice, 6 months after the accident, we were settled into our new home, and I wasn't quite yet adjusted to my surroundings, so it was not a surprise when I awoke in the pitch black of my room at some point in the middle of the night. Without my glasses, I wasn't able to see the numbers on the clock to tell me exactly what time it was, but the chirp of crickets outside my window and the absolute absence of light told me that it was well beyond my bedtime, and it wouldn't have much mattered if I could see the clock anyway, as I was unable to turn my head to face it. My body was frozen. No matter how much effort I exerted, I couldn't even wiggle a finger. I was petrified. My breaths came rapidly, and I tried to call out for my parents, but my vocal cords refused to vibrate, and then I heard it. "Who are you?" A childlike whisper grated through my head, a voice simultaneously familiar and completely foreign, originating from somewhere in the depths of my brain. "What?" I replied in thought, still unable to speak aloud. "You shouldn't be here." It sounded just as frightened as I was, trembling near to tears. Then, without warning, my left arm moved. Absent my command, or me willing it to do so, I felt it raise up off the bed and ball its hand into a fist. Open and closed, open and closed. The fingers curled in and out as if trying to grasp something in the air. "You shouldn't be here." The voice screamed at me, and in instinctual self-preservation, I yelled back at it in my mind, "Stop, leave me alone," willing it to go away with every ounce of strength in my tiny body, and my arm fell back to my side. Then suddenly, as quickly as it had come on, my paralysis lifted. Sweating profusely, I threw my covers off and ran for my parents' bedroom as quickly as I could. One small benefit to my new condition was that I could navigate much more easily in the dark than others. Most days I didn't even bother with my glasses as they gave me a headache, and I got very used to finding my way without the benefit of sight. The route from my room to my mother and father's was already memorized, and I was shaking them awake less than a minute after regaining my mobility. It wasn't easy for me to explain to them what had happened, as they were having to translate the hysterical words I managed to gasp out through fierce hyperventilation, but eventually they pieced together my story of the voice, and how I briefly lost control of my body. I expected that they'd be scared too, that they might even take me to the hospital, yet I was shocked when they barely reacted. It's not as if they were cold and uncaring, they did comfort me. My mother rubbed my back while my father described sleep paralysis, saying that that was very likely what I'd experienced, and they kept repeating that it was a perfectly normal thing. Even as a young child, I could tell there was something wrong with their logic. Dad noted that sleep paralysis could involve hallucinations, accounting for the voice, and a loss of motor function, accounting for me waking up frozen. However, it didn't elucidate how my arm had moved on its own, or the strange grasping motion it kept repeating. He had no answers for that, other than to tell me that I was okay, that I was safe, that the voice hadn't hurt me, and that the worst part of the experience was only the fear it induced. But he did warn me that it might happen again, and with his warning he tendered some advice. If the voice comes back and you find that you're not in control anymore, just do exactly what you did tonight, okay? Tell it to go away and that you're in charge, he said. And with no other guidance or plans on how to deal with it, when it did return again and again, that's exactly what I did. As I grew, I learned to live with it. Neither of my parents were willing to discuss it beyond that first night other than to reiterate my father's instructions, and it only infrequently impacted my existence. By the time I was 12, I had heard it on 9 different occasions, always at night, always awaking me from a deep sleep. The physical manifestations were identical each instance, complete immobility other than my phantom arm grasping at the air. But the phrases that wormed through my mind changed. Not fair, leave, your fault, stolen. However, every time it looped back around to, you shouldn't be here. And though on each intrusion I was able to fend it off by telling it to leave and that I was in control, every occurrence resulted in pure terror for me. No matter how many times my parents repeated that it was sleep paralysis and there was nothing to fear long term, I was still worried that one day it might take over for good, that one day I would become a passenger in my own body, especially considering that I didn't understand why it was happening. As I mentioned, I didn't have many memories from before the accident, but I was certain that it had never happened before then. I surmised that there must have been something about the wreck that triggered it, and it wasn't until 5 years after it happened that I first heard the term survivor's guilt. My mother was watching a daytime talk show and they were interviewing guests that had survived traumatic accidents, one of whom described something similar to what I was experiencing, a voice in their head nagging them for still being alive when others had died. Listening to their story, I found myself empathizing with them. Maybe subconsciously, I was punishing myself for causing the accident by distracting my mother. Maybe, "You shouldn't be here" was the voice telling me that I shouldn't be alive when it was my fault that other people weren't. But it wasn't a perfect fit for everything the voice said. What did it mean when it told me to leave or said stolen? It was more difficult to view those words the lens of survivor's guilt, yet it was the best theory I had and the one that I carried until I was 15. Until I met my best friend Carl in freshman homeroom, the first real friend that I made after the wreck. He didn't care how disfigured my face was or that I couldn't see. A bit of an outcast himself, we quickly bonded and I shared everything about myself with him, including the details of how I received my injuries, and of the whispers in my head. My father had told me explicitly that I should never speak about the voice to anyone else. Really, he told me never to speak of it at all, but especially not to mention it outside of our house. However, I trusted Carl implicitly. He told me about his struggles at home, about his mom's drinking and his dad's neglect. I didn't think it fair to hold back any details of my life from him. So it was Carl that gave me my second theory on the origins of the voice, as he didn't agree that it was a simple case of survivor's guilt. He suspected an attachment. Carl was much more into the world of the dark and creepy than I was. He suggested that the spirit of the boy that had perished in the other vehicle may have searched for the nearest living body it could find after it had been ripped from its own and crept inside. In his words, inhabitation was a much better explanation for what was happening to me than survivor's guilt, and for the first time I considered that possibly what I was hearing wasn't a manifestation from my own mind but was someone else speaking with me. It would explain why the voice hadn't aged with me over time, why every night that it returned to me it still sounded like a scared and angry child, and I had to admit that every phrase the voice had uttered made more sense when viewed from that angle. We theorized that the boy's soul didn't understand what had happened to it, that on nights when I was particularly vulnerable, fast asleep and emotionally peaceful, it could push me aside and briefly gain control of my body, that it was confused and thought I was the intruder. Leave, stolen, you shouldn't be here. But though it illuminated why the voice might be saying some of the things that it was, our hypothesis also pointed to a grim conclusion. The boy wanted me out. My fear of one day becoming a guest within my own body grew. Previously, I'd worried that it was just my own brain that would disconnect its physical control from my mental directions. But now I pondered the frightful possibility that there was a spirit trapped within me that was actively trying to take over. However, in addition to the dread, the prospect also filled me with a deep sadness. As the voice had forcefully reminded me several times, it was my fault that it was in this situation. I had distracted my mother, I had caused the accident. It would still be happily residing in its original host if not for me. I asked Carl if there was anything we could do to try and free it, surmising that sending it on would be preferable for it than forever residing in an alien world. He recommended that we try a Ouija board, thinking that we could contact the imprisoned soul and help it comprehend what had happened, thinking we might even be able to get it to leave once it realized that it did not belong in this world anymore. Yet, over the next 3 years, we made more than 50 attempts to communicate with the spirit directly, resulting in more than 50 failures. No matter the time of day, the ambiance we set, the music, the scents, the incantations, the boy would not speak to us, but he still came to me at night. 8 more visits during those 3 years, each time angrier than the last. Leave, stolen, mine. And each time he became harder to push out, each time he held control for longer. Carl was sleeping at my house during the most recent episode, and was nearly killed when he attempted to stop the possession. He had awoken to the distressed noises of me struggling for power over my faculties, and saw my arm rise from the bed, making the repetitive, squeezing motion I detailed to him. Knowing what was happening, he tried to shake me from the trance, but was unsuccessful in rattling me free. And then I witnessed my own body attack him. Throttling blows landed on Carl's chest and face. I sprang from the bed and pinned him to the floor. Hands that I couldn't stop wrapped themselves around his throat and began to crush down on his windpipe. Leave, I'm in control, leave, I'm in control, I shouted inside my head, desperately trying to regain power over my fingers before the life drained from Carl's face. And mercifully, I felt my grasp begin to loosen just as his eyes were rolling back in his head. Collapsing onto the floor next to Carl, I heard him coughing and gasping for air while the voice screamed a final defiant appeal before it receded to the depths of my consciousness. Give it back. Neither Carl nor I slept the remainder of that night. I apologized over and over for what I'd done to to him, but he told me that it wasn't necessary. He knew that it wasn't really me that had attacked him, yet he began to withdraw from our friendship. Up to that point, I think Carl had found my affliction to be a curiosity, something fun and mysterious to investigate. However, the attack had exposed the true reality of it to him, and he became just as afraid of it as I was. And any time that I asked him to hang out after that night, he made an excuse. The voice took the only real friend that I had in the world, and it made me furious. 11 years had passed since the accident. 11 years the voice had been punishing me for my mistake. I needed to be free of it. So I decided to share my story online on several paranormal forums, asking if anyone could help, looking for a medium or maybe even an exorcist that could pry the unwelcome spirit from me. And yesterday someone responded. "I've been looking for you," began the cryptic message in my inbox. "It's not a spirit you're hearing." Below those words, 2 photographs were pasted, one of my parents with me before the accident and one of a young woman with 2 boys. A screaming face flashed through my mind, the young woman moments before her car impacted ours, and here she was again, smiling with her sons flanking her on either side. The older boy I didn't recognize, but the younger. The younger was familiar. I flicked between the 2 photos and realized how similar my younger self looked to her younger son. Similar age, similar hair color, similar eye color, we might pass for brothers too. But it wasn't just our similarities that bothered me. It had been over 10 years since I'd looked into a mirror with my glasses on. 10 years since I'd seen my face clearly. Or was it his face? I closed my eyes and forced the blurry image from that morning up out of the depths of my memories, and my pulse quickened when it came into focus. Beneath the heavy scarring, under the swelling and bruises, it wasn't the face of the boy with my parents reflected back at me. It was his. Shaking, I took my laptop with me to the nearest bathroom and looked at myself directly for the first time in a decade. Then, maximizing the image of the mother and her boys on the screen, I imagined what the younger would have looked like aged 18, and he stared back at me in the mirror. That moment, a splitting headache ripped through my skull, and I dropped to the floor. Grasping my head, I shrieked in pain while a series of images cascaded through my brain. I was seeing the accident again, though not from my perspective. I was seeing it from his. My mother's car flew into the intersection, and it was too late for his mother to stop. She screamed and reached for the back seat where he was seated, and he stretched forward with his left hand to grab her arm. He was closing his fist to squeeze it just as the impact threw her through the windshield, and an instant later, everything went black. He awoke in the hospital weeks later but was no longer the one in charge of his body. A new director had been installed. I'd been installed. The boy could hear my thoughts. He could see my memories. He knew an invader had taken control of his life, but he was powerless to do anything about it. And he watched as a man he didn't recognize shook hands with a surgeon, thanking him for saving his son's life, thanking him for being willing to perform such a radical procedure in order to do it. As the pain in my head began to wane and the scene from the hospital was replaced with the bathroom tile I'd toppled onto, I finally understood what the voice was. I understood what my father had done. I understood why my parents had never taken me to a doctor or to therapy to address the voice, why they had been so firm in their assertions that I'd tell it that I was in charge whenever it returned. They already knew what it was. In the boy's memories, it was a neurosurgeon that my father was shaking hands with. They were old friends. He was the one that saved my life, though he'd only saved part of me. The other boy hadn't perished that day, as they'd all lied to me. I had. All but my brain, which they transferred to the surviving boy's body. He wasn't the intruder. I was. Lying there on the cold bathroom floor, my mind reeled with the horrifying truth that it was now burdened with. I'd made the boy a prisoner in his own body. Sobbing, I pulled myself to my feet and looked again at the anonymous message that had shattered my reality. And I found a few more short sentences beneath the photos. "You killed my mother. You stole my brother's body. I will find you. I don't know what to do. I can't eat. I can't sleep. I crushed my glasses last night, never wanting to catch even a glimpse of my face again. I thought about trying to share control with my roommate, but beyond having no idea how to go about that, I'm terrified of what he'll do if I give him the reins, because now that I know for sure he's in there, now that I know the voice isn't survivor's guilt or a wayward spirit, I can feel him. He's stewing there in the back of our head, scared, furious, mutinous. He knows his brother's looking for him, and he's fighting to take over. Please feed Mohan his dog food pedigree at 2 p.m. The packet is in the cupboard and his dog bowl is kept near the kitchen sink. I stared at the WhatsApp message, reading it again and again. My emotions were caught between bemusement and nervousness at the bizarre request. I know what you all are thinking, just feed the dog his kibble. But here are the facts. Mohan is not a dog, he is a 10-year-old. To give you all some context upon my situation, I had agreed to babysit Mrs. Sharma's son Mohan because my mother wanted our new kooky neighbor to feel at home. And no, this was not a paid babysitting job. It was just an endeavor to build neighborly relations by my over-enthusiastic mother. But as I said just now, Mrs. Sharma was a kooky. I had only observed her twice, but both the moments left quite an impression upon me. The first one happened when I caught her cutting a bar of soap like a carrot upon my mother's chopping board. She had brought a pack of those as gifts when she first came to visit us. A brand new pack of expensive sandal soaps. At that time, I was reading a book from a position where she could not see me, but I could see her on the sofa chatting with my mother. But when my mother went to the terrace to fetch our drying clothes for 10 minutes, I surreptitiously watched her take one of the bars and start dicing it upon the chopping board my mother had just used for slicing radishes. I looked away after 5 minutes, but Mrs. Sharma had clearly left no trace of her actions because when my mother came back, they continued their nonsensical conversations while my mother once again picked up her knife and continued chopping the remaining vegetables. Needless to say, I refused to eat dinner that night and ordered from Zomato. The second incident happened when I caught Mrs. Sharma tasting Pedigree, a popular brand of dog food, when my mother and I were visiting her home. Mrs. Sharma went into her kitchen to pour some drinks and snacks for us while we were waiting in her guest room. At that time, I had a sudden urge to use the washroom. I silently walked past the kitchen, but my eyes happened to glance upon her for a few seconds, and there she was, taking kibbles out of a Pedigree packet and putting them in her mouth. I refused to eat anything she served to me and my mom later on. I also mentally grimaced every time my mom picked a bite to eat. The woman clearly had issues, and I wish that my mom would have stayed clear of her, but fate had other plans. The two had become fast friends, and now I was saddled with babysitting Mrs. Sharma's 10-year-old son Mohan. When I had questioned my mother about why we didn't see Mohan during our visit to Mrs. Sharma's house, Mom told me that it was because he had gone on a walk with a girl from our colony. My mom also gave me a list of written instructions on how to take care of that kid. I wished she would just WhatsApp me, but she just had to write it on paper in her terrible handwriting. Honestly, the only redeeming quality of Mrs. Sharma so far was that she was not as technophobic as my mother and had agreed to message me the instructions. The babysitting ordeal was to last from 12 noon till 6 in the evening. I had not even glanced upon the list my mother had given me, as Mrs. Sharma had promised me that she would text me the relevant tasks throughout the day. So, with an irritated look up on my face, I went to pursue the challenge. I first saw Mohan in the living room of their house, watching television. An episode of Doraemon blared from the television and I winced at how loud it was, but the kid was unaffected. Mrs. Sharma had just deposited the keys to her house with me right outside the house and left in a hurry, without even introducing me to her kid. Her craziness clearly wasn't going away anytime soon. I felt sorry for the kid for having such a weird mother without even having met him, so that is how I had relaxed a little and entered their living room after safely locking the door. I was told by my mother that Mohan was 10 years old, and he looked exactly like a normal 10-year-old would. He was watching the television screen with his black hair combed back, wearing a red t-shirt and a pair of comfortable pants, munching upon Maggi noodles with a glass of mango juice nearby. I introduced myself to him and he monotonously replied to my basic questions, his attention clearly fixed upon the television. But he looked comfortable enough, so I went into the guest bedroom of the house to watch Dairy Girls on Netflix after reassuring him to call me if he needs anything. I was captivated by the show until Mrs. Sharma's message notification came on WhatsApp. That is when the weird message that I had talked about earlier came in at 1:40 p.m. and reading the message made me wish that there was some version of CPS in India, because the entire event just screamed that something abusive was going on with Mohan and his mother. I wondered if Mrs. Sharma was joking with me, so I nervously went to the cupboard to see if I would actually find dog food over there. I was hoping that the last time I saw her eat Pedigree kibbles in her kitchen was just some hallucination or glitch in the Matrix moment, but there it was, a yellow packet with a cute little golden retriever picture, a big packet of Pedigree. I stared at it for a good 10 minutes, wondering what my next steps should be. Should I make a run for it and inform my mother about the incident, or should I grab Mohan along with me too? Or should I just ignore my conscience and feed him the dog food and finish my babysitting task? Because if the past events were anything to go by, it certainly would not be the first time he would be eating it. My mind was racing in all directions, until suddenly I heard scratching at one of the bedroom doors nearby. To say that my blood had turned to ice by now would be an understatement. I quickly ran to Mohan and asked him what was causing the scratching. Maybe it was just a pet that Mrs. Sharma had confused with Mohan, I thought nervously, but Mohan's reply caught me off guard. "It is the red man," he told me. What? Just ignore him and don't open that door. After giving that vague answer, he went back to watching some cartoon. I was beyond scared by this point and just wanted to bolt out of the house. But one question still lingered in my mind. "Does your mother feed you pedigree?" I asked him cautiously. Mohan looked at me for a few seconds and nodded yes. I sucked in a breath and hurriedly told him to come with me to my house. He had clearly been abused and was under some delusion of the red man. I could not in good conscience leave the kid here with that crazy witch. So I just grabbed his arm and started dragging him with me. I frantically reassured him that we would call the police on his mother and he would be safe from her, but he quietly told me that there was no point to that. That made me pause in my tracks. I looked over my shoulder to see that he had suddenly become hunched over and was shaking with tears. "That woman is not my mother. My mother was killed 2 years ago. The red man had killed her, and if you try to complain about it, it will kill you." "What the hell are you talking about?" I screamed at the kid, my mind spinning. "It is true. It used to be just me and my mom. The real Radhika Sharma. She used to be normal. But one weird rule existed in our house. Mom had forbidden me from going to the guest room of my house, claiming that a ghost lives there, and we should be wary of him. I used to be extremely afraid of that threat because I could sometimes hear scratching sounds from behind that locked door. One night, when I went to get water, I saw her standing outside the door to that room with a very frightened look on her face. I saw it. A red hand had suddenly emerged from the door and grabbed her inside. I ran back to my room and hid under the covers the entire night. I was sobbing throughout the night and was terrified. Terrified that my mother had been killed. Terrified that the red man exists and that he would come after me. He never came out. The next day, my mother came to wake me up. I was scared but happy to see her. But that morning for breakfast, she served me the pedigree that used to feed our dog at that time. Her eccentric behavior did not end there. She would always take baths with a mixture of milk and oil. She would sleep on the roof of our car with her eyes open. She would twist her neck at odd angles pretty often, and she would also cut up slices of soap to feed our dog. Our dog, he died soon because of that. I stared at Mohan with a numb feeling. He continued his rambles. I knew then that thing was not my mother, that my mommy was dead, and I also knew that whatever that thing is, it was trying to imitate humans. It has gotten rather good at it over 2 years. We moved a lot during that time. It will always chat up the new neighbors, trying to appear more and more normal. I knew it was some weird creature, but I also knew that it was not the red man, because no matter where we moved, there would always be one of our rooms that would be locked and off limits to me, and I could hear scratching behind it. He finally finished his story while sobbing throughout. I just kept on standing there, feeling like an icy hand had gripped my heart. I was not afraid for the kid. I knew he would survive somehow. I was afraid for myself, knowing that I had basically entered a haunted house. Mohan had escaped my grasp and ran upstairs, probably to cry to himself some more. But I knew that if I didn't get out of the house that second, my legs would give out and I would not escape alive. I was about to make a run for it when I heard a tire screech in the background. Mrs. Sharma, or more pointedly, the thing imitating her, was home. I just stood there frozen like a statue when the lock turned. The thing must have had a spare key, of course, and within moments it opened the door and entered the house with a cheery face. "Hello dear, how was your day? I am sorry I came home early. The grocery shop I like was closed today and I was free to come home early. I hope you had fun with Mohan, he is very friendly." The thing grinned at me. I just stared in silence, not a movement out of me. It moved towards the room from where the scratching sounds were coming from, still chatting me up. I hope Mohan ate his food properly. He generally is a good boy, but I had to discipline him for a very long time for him to reach that stage when it comes to food. I watched in silent horror as it came to stand before the door with the scratching sounds, but a confused expression came upon his face. "Dearie, did you not let Mohan out of the room?" Huh? The inquisitive expression just escaped my mouth, the first prickle of curiosity coming over me. Without any warning, its hands turned the handle and opened the door. I screamed and tried to make a run for it, until I heard a bark from behind me. I just froze up on the spot, slowly turning my head around. I expected to see a grotesque red figure with a creepy smile coming at me with inhuman speed. Instead, a happy golden retriever ran up to me. I tried to collect my thoughts for a minute. I expected that this was all a show, and both the woman and and dog would soon reveal their true paranormal forms, but nothing of that sort happened. The golden happily continued to hug me, and Mrs. Sharma watched with a worried look on her face. "Did you not feed him, dearie? Mohan must be very hungry now," Mrs. Sharma replied, pointing to the dog. "What are you talking about? Mohan is your son, isn't he?" "I refer to him as my son, but he is not my actual son, dearie. He is a dog. Why are you asking such a weird question?" "But were you confused all this time because you thought I had an actual son? I never had a child, and I had never been married. I have only had one companion for 10 years. My beloved Mohan. Let me feed him now. He must be hungry." With that, she walked towards the kitchen. I just excused myself and ran to my home. I ambushed my mother as soon as I saw her. "Did you know that Mohan was a dog?" I angrily questioned my mother. "Of course. Why are you asking such an idiotic question? Was that not clear enough the first time you saw him? Mohan being a dog was literally the first thing I wrote in my list, but you did not read it." My mother chided me. I was at a complete loss of words. If Mohan was a dog, then who the hell was the boy I talked to? Wanting more answers, I started narrating Mrs. Sharma's past actions to my mother. I told her about Mrs. Sharma's weird soap chopping and pedigree eating behaviors from earlier. I expected her to be shocked at this, but she only laughed. She was chopping the soap because I had asked her to do that, silly. I had wanted to take those pieces of soap to keep them in our potted plants. I had read somewhere that they repel insects and wanted to check for myself. And as far as the pedigree eating is concerned, she did not eat it. She told me that she puts a few pieces in her mouth to encourage Mohan to eat it. She sometimes does it even when he is not there out of absent-mindedness. You may think it is weird, but the tactic has been quite effective so far. With that, my mother started walking towards the dining table, still speaking. "You have really disappointed me this time. I expected you would take better care of Mohan. You are lucky Mrs. Sharma is a sweet lady. She would probably forgive you. Mrs. Sharma had even brought a gift for you for taking care of Mohan." My mother kept on ranting. My mother pointed towards a painting kept on the dining table, but as soon as I saw it, beads of sweat started collecting on my forehead and I felt like I would faint, because the painting consisted of a picture of the same boy I had talked to earlier that day, and on the bottom right corner, it was signed as the Red Man. Since then, I have tried to throw out the painting multiple times, but it keeps on showing up in weird places in my house. So all I am requesting you guys is that if you ever end up babysitting a kid talking about the Red Man, just call an exorcist. The trouble started when a really nice lady moved into the apartment across the hall. Mrs. Armstrong, she lets me and my mom call her Amanda because she likes us, is in her 70s and used to be a nurse. The day we met, she invited us over for chili con carne. My mom said Amanda was a dying breed and that very few people acted so neighborly anymore. As I wolfed the chili down, Amanda mentioned her planned trip to Amsterdam. Mom joked she should visit the sex museum to get some inspiration. "Don't you mean torture museum?" Amanda replied, laughing. I didn't really get the joke. After the meal, Amanda cleared our plates. I excused myself to use the bathroom but opened the wrong door. That's how I met Benji. Benji is a blonde Pomapoo, which is a type of dog. He chased me down the hall, growling and barking. Luckily, Mom zipped over in a flash. She used to train special dogs that helped blind people, which meant animals loved her. If she walked into a lion's den, the lions would probably roll over and ask her to scratch the soft fur on their bellies. As she petted Benji, I ate chocolate cake. Mom always said I should try being nice by asking people questions, so I asked Amanda about a picture on the wall, and her eyes went misty. I asked Mom if I did something wrong, but Amanda promised everything was okay. She said the picture was of her daughter who got sick and died a long time ago. Like Amanda, the girl was very pretty, except she had red hair, not white. Mom got choked up telling Amanda about my dizzy spells and migraines. Because I got brainstorm clouds every few weeks, I couldn't move out after I finished school, but Mom explained how I always help with the bills. A nice man called Mr. McCann owns a hotel nearby, and he lets me work in its restaurant sometimes. Mr. McCann doesn't have a problem with me taking time off whenever I'm sick. I'll admit I'm very lucky to have Mom. She always helps nurse me back to health. After Amanda told us about her daughter, she stayed quiet for a while. To make her feel better, I said, "Don't be sad. I can tell from how much Benji loves you, your daughter was lucky to have you as a mother." After that, Amanda gave me an extra piece of cake. "Oh, one more thing," she said as she walked us to the door. "Please don't mention Benji to anybody." The landlord, Mr. White, was friendly, but he didn't like animals. Mom promised her secret would be safe with us, and then back home she said, "That was a nice thing you said back there." Sometimes Mr. White lived in the apartment below ours. He worked as a doctor but owned a bigger house in the country, so he only stayed there whenever he got too tired to drive home. Mom said this was good because having somebody stomp around downstairs would make my migraines worse. Mr. White also let us pay our rent late if we didn't have much money that month. In January, Mr. White died of a heart attack. This made me sad because he always left us treats and a nice card on Christmas. Mom told me his son, a man also called Mr. White, inherited the property and that she hoped nothing would change. The day the moving vans appeared, Mom and Amanda looked nervous. New Mr. White planned on living downstairs all the time. This meant Amanda needed to keep Benji inside and only take him for walks when she knew the coast was clear. I said new Mr. White might have liked animals more than his dad, but Mom said sometimes it's better to keep your mouth shut about these things. To reach our apartment, you needed to go through the main hall and up a set of stairs beside Mr. White's door, and the day after he moved in, he came out just as me and Mom arrived with our shopping bags. He kept asking Mom if she had a husband. Then he pointed at me and said, "What's his problem?" "He doesn't have a effing problem," Mom shouted, her face all red. Then she dragged me upstairs. I said Mr. White must be super friendly because friendly people ask people questions, but she said he didn't have friendship on his mind. I asked why Mr. White thought I had a problem, and she grabbed my hands and said, "There's nothing wrong with you, Danny." She explained because I was sick for most of my childhood, I never got to spend time with the other kids, which meant I still had lots to learn about communication. Mr. White started cornering Mom at the stairs a lot. She said he must have been listening for her. She started tiptoeing. This worked for a while, but then he started knocking on our door. He'd say things like, "Is the water pressure okay?" or "Did everybody's internet drop or just mine?" One afternoon I heard a commotion from my bedroom and went down the hall. Our apartment door opened onto the lounge. Standing there, Mr. White said, "You're busy watching him again? What's the matter with that boy anyway?" "Danny's very sick." "What, can't you let him off the leash for one night?" "I'm sorry." So he'd old enough to grow a mustache but can't wipe his own butt. After Mom slammed the door, we made eye contact. She asked how much I heard. I said everything. I could tell by her tone she was upset, so I gave her a big hug. I told her if Mr. White made her cry again, I'd beat him up, and that made her smile. Then I said I'd tear his stomach open and rip his innards out, and she told me I'd gone too far. A few days later, I got startled awake by somebody pounding the door. My brain clouds meant it was hard to follow what happened, but Mr. White kept screaming the word dog over and over. In the morning, Mom wouldn't tell me about their argument, but Amanda came over with a bottle of wine like the kind they serve at the hotel. Mom told me to go to my room, but I hid in the hall instead. Mr. White was annoyed about the yappy F word running around our apartment. He said he heard a dog's toenails click across the floor, which would be his roof. Amanda heard this and knew he meant Benji, but was terrified what would happen if Mr. White found out. "Benji's all I've got," she said through tears. Mom hugged her and told her not to worry. Mr. White started causing lots of trouble. Mom said she always smelled alcohol on his breath, and when people had too much alcohol at the hotel, that's when the doormen kicked them out. One night, I woke up to Mom screaming, "Do you see a doggy bull anywhere around her, or how about a leash?" Blood was thumping in my ears and their loud voices were so painful. I squeezed my eyes shut and silently counted to 10, making my mind blank until my head stopped hurting. In the morning, Amanda brought us cookies. "I don't understand how he can still hear Benji," she said. "I've soundproofed the apartment." She offered to help with our rent, but Mom said no. She said Mr. White was probably just making excuses to be angry because she wouldn't F-word him. Later, she explained to me we needed to stay on our best behavior because that B-word would have used any reason to evict us. In April, Mr. White started pounding the door one night. I got up and went to the lounge where Mom was looking through the keyhole. She whispered for me to go back to bed, but I didn't want to leave her. I had my phone in my hand. I mouthed the word police, but she winced like she'd been punched in the gut and shook her head. I heard a noise of a key in the lock. Then Mr. White came in. He talked all funny like the drunk people at the hotel. He grabbed Mom by the hair and I got so mad I clenched my fist. He looked at me and then laughed. He leaned in close and said, "What, you're gonna be a big Eggman now. His breath tasted so awful it almost made me throw up. I don't remember what happened next, but blood was trickling down the side of Mr. White's face. He wiped a red smear away with his hand and then knocked me to the floor. He kept hitting me and hitting me. Then he lifted the corner of his shirt and I saw a knife, but before he could grab it, Mom jumped on his back. He slammed her backwards against the wall, and for a second it looked as if he was going to kill her, but instead he spat in her face. "One more problem and you and that moron are gone," he screamed in her face, then stormed off. Afterwards, Mom was so upset she couldn't speak. Amanda came over and when she saw blood everywhere, said we needed to call the police. Mom freaked out. She got all serious and said, "I need to tell you something." Amanda stitched up a cut on top of my skull and then gave me tablets to make it not hurt anymore. Afterwards, they told me to stay in bed, but my head hurt so much I couldn't sleep. I lay there, tossing and turning until I needed to use the bathroom. From the kitchen, I heard Mom and Amanda's voices and peeked through the gap in the door. Amanda looked surprised. Mom showed Amanda something on her phone. After that, Amanda walked around while Mom kept saying, "It's true." Then Amanda agreed to not call the police. She said she'd help change the lock so Mr. White couldn't get in. Because I couldn't work for a long time, bills started piling up on the kitchen table and Mom bought a different kind of Coke, one that didn't taste as good, whenever we went shopping. She started biting her nails too. Every time I thought about Mr. White, I got angry. Then I felt bad for feeling angry. I said we should call the police so they'd come and arrest him, but she said nobody would believe us and we'd just get evicted anyway. So I had the idea to install a security camera. That way, if he caused more trouble, we'd have proof. After my bruises healed, I worked extra hard at the hotel until I'd saved enough money from tips. I installed the camera on the cabinet in the corner. I angled it so you could see the front door, the wall, part of the sofa, and the window at the front of the apartment. I knew Mom would be furious if she found out what I'd done, so I hid the power cable behind a row of dusty books she never read. It wasn't long before I felt the storm clouds setting in again. I spent several days in bed with Mom bringing me my meals until one night I woke up drenched in sweat, twitching and whining. From somewhere nearby I heard Mom scream. It felt like I might explode and the haze got way worse. After that, all I remember is darkness. I woke up in bed with vomit all over myself. I cried and called for Mom, but she didn't appear. I dragged myself into the lounge where her and Amanda mopped the floor. Mom reacted like she was watching a scary movie when she noticed me. The front door wasn't sitting right and a lamp was broke. "What happened?" I asked, confused. She practically marched me into bed. She said she didn't want me making my condition worse, but I could tell from her voice she was keeping a secret. A big one. She dabbed my head with a wet cloth, promising there was nothing to worry about. The second she left me alone, I pulled up the camera footage on my phone. It started with Mr. White hammering the door, his voice muffled and unclear. Mom begged him to leave. There was a sound of him trying his key, and then his voice got even louder. The door bounced in its frame until it crashed open and slammed against the inside wall. Mom threw her arm across the doorway, creating a barrier, but Mr. White backhanded her to the floor. She threw her arms around his waist and prayed like people do in church, and for a second he looked as if he might leave. Then I crawled into frame and hit his ankles with my hands. I was so sick I don't even remember doing it. Mr. White grabbed my hair and pulled out his knife, but before he could use it, Mom grabbed a lamp and hit him on the head, so he grabbed her by the throat and pushed her against the wall. I crawled out of the frame crying. Mom's eyes bulged out of her skull and her face went bright red, and I thought she was going to die. But then a gray fuzzball hit him and sent him tumbling across the floor. The gray thing took up a lot of the frame. I couldn't make it out so well in the dark, but some clouds must have gone away because lots of moonlight shone through the window and I realized it was a really big wolf. Its mouth was like a cavern, and the sharp fangs sank into Mr. White's scalp, and then blood poured down his face. The wolf turned to Mom and licked her hand. She ran her fingers through the thick fur on top of its head. A little later, Mrs. Armstrong appeared in the doorway. At first, she looked shocked, but then Mom waved her over and she approached the wolf nervously. She scratched the wolf behind its ear. Afterwards, Mom buried her head in her hands, sobbing. Amanda grabbed a severed arm and waved it like a stick, shouting, "Here, Danny," until the wolf followed her out of frame. Amanda returned with a bucket and a mop. I scrolled ahead in the footage. The two of them got rid of Mr. White and then cleaned until I appeared, asking what happened. Now I'm still here in bed, and honestly, I am so scared. I don't think the wolf would hurt me because it didn't hurt Mom or Amanda, so I think maybe it only hurts people who cause trouble. I guess she didn't want me to call the police in case they found the wolf. I don't know why Mom wouldn't tell me about it though. I know animals get weird around me, but I think we maybe be good friends since we have the same name. I'm nervous we might get evicted, but maybe not because Mr. White is dead. I love Mom more than the world, so I'm obviously not going to do anything to get her in trouble, but I'm still really scared and confused. Anyway, thanks for reading my story. Hopefully I figure things out soon. You may think you know this space agency, but you don't. NASA is not the sum of its publicly presented parts. I'm not simply talking about classified research and development. I'm talking about the dozens of space programs veiled from prying eyes, programs hidden even from many folk within the company. And when I was finally offered the privilege of peering behind the curtain, I found myself at the eye of an unprecedented storm, a disaster beyond the bounds of earthly horror, the GE-1 mission. Since the climax of the space race, a consensus has grown, a prevailing belief that NASA has abandoned the final frontier. It is, however, an absurd notion that the brightest minds of this agency no longer care about space's mysteries. The truth is that our best scientists decided decades ago to shield humanity from the hellish things we uncovered, things lying in the pits of space that no light reaches. NASA projects featured in the media have low stakes. Even the International Space Station sits at the foot of this organization's priorities. Significant expeditions are classified. The ones intended to catapult humanity towards the stars, for instance. The ones using spacecraft beyond what the average person deems possible with human technology. We are capable of things that would leave you awestruck. We are capable of things that would leave you cold. The GE-1 spacecraft launched on Wednesday, 25th January 2023. It sailed beyond our solar system, pursuing a slow signal that was coursing through the outer reaches of the Milky Way. Not an intelligible transmission, but a frequency that intrigued us nonetheless, a frequency named 784A. Hysteria swept the company on the date of the signal's first interception, Saturday 29th October 2022. Given 784A's ever-moving source, the frequency sparked feverish intrigue. Regarding the nature of the mysterious moving signal, there seemed to be a different hypothesis from every NASA employee with clearance. It was truly an exhilarating time. And things reached a fever pitch when the GE-1 craft launched a few months later. Employees weren't eating or sleeping. They spent their waking hours sharing ideas about the mysterious transmission from space, a circuit board of explanations that finally overloaded on Thursday, 2nd February 2023, the day on which the GE-1 stopped responding to NASA. 1 week later, on Thursday, 9th February, the signal from the spacecraft returned. Commander Irwin, this is Mission Control. Dr. Parker, the head of the project, announced, Mission Control to GE-1, do you copy? Roger, Mission Control, Commander Tim Irwin responded. We've been trying to reach you. We lost contact with GE-1 7 days ago, Commander. What happened? What is your status? Dr. Parker asked. All systems are fine, Mission Control, Irwin replied. Dr. Parker seemed flustered by the commander's nonchalant demeanor. The project leader clawed at his gray, thinning hair with tense fingers. The old man seemed to be carefully considering his next utterance. 7 days without contact, Commander. 7. GE-1 disappeared at our end. Do you have a status report? Anything which might explain why we were unable to communicate with one another? Parker asked. Nothing, Mission Control, Irwin blankly replied. As for 784A, we reached the transmission point of the signal. There was nothing to be found. We have collected as much data as possible, requesting clearance to return home. There were several minutes of nervous mumbling from various scientists and board members. Dr. Parker looked broken beyond measure by the time he leaned forwards, heavy breath beating against the microphone. He was trembling with a mixture of rage and confusion. Roger, Commander Irwin, you have clearance to come home, Parked croakily whispered. On a vessel traversing space at an unfathomable pace, the astronauts returned home. The craft silently landed at an unofficial NASA site on Wednesday the 15th of February, 2023. The GE-1 crew emerged, greeted by a small, applauding crowd. Tim Irwin, Gianna Danes, and Matthias Olsen. Those were the three astronauts who supposedly emerged from the spacecraft. And at first, we had no reason to believe anything else. We recognized the three faces, the three voices, the three brilliant minds. However, it did not take long for slight oddities to slip through the cracks. I overheard something perplexing whilst Tim Irwin spoke to his wife, Melissa Irwin, in the break room. I love you, Melody, the astronaut said. Melissa frowned, smiling awkwardly. Melody? Who is Melody? I didn't intend to eavesdrop. I'd been helping myself to a drink. Still, I slowed down when I heard that. Melissa was clearly teasing her exhausted husband, but there was a slight tinge of uncertainty in her voice. And I'll admit that I was a little too nosy. I pretended to weigh up 2 different drinks before I made my way out of the room. As a result, I managed to catch the tail end of the commander's strange fumble. Irwin cleared his throat. I'm sorry, honey, forgot my wife's name, Melissa laughed, finishing his sentence. No worries, honey. It's Melissa, by the way. Just to let you know, I didn't realize I had to worry about you finding another woman in space. I know your name, Tim icily sliced. I froze halfway out of the door as Melissa replied with a timid voice. Sorry, sweetie, I know, I was only joking, she assured. Your head must be all over the place. You look like you need a good rest. I laughed to myself once I was out of earshot, but I felt the same as Melissa. Something was slightly uneven about Tim's disposition. It wasn't simply a sleep-deprived brain. I knew that, and she knew that. The commander's voice changed when his wife confronted him. It didn't sound like the astronaut any longer. I didn't know Tim incredibly well, but I knew that he was different. Whatever the case, I would have forgotten about the entire thing, dismissing my gut feeling as the result of a nerve-wracking week or two. Everybody had been unsettled since GE-1 lost its signal. We were still recovering from the stress of those awful 7 days without any communication with the spacecraft. There is one other thing worth mentioning from the day of GE-1's return. One of my coworkers claimed to find Gianna Dane standing alone in a corridor, staring at a bathroom door, not entering, not moving. Sleep deprivation, I thought again. 1 year later, that explanation no longer sufficed. On Wednesday, 31st January 2024, an unidentified object entered Earth's atmosphere, tumbling into the Pacific Ocean, a catastrophe that was only brought to NASA's attention because the object in question utilized advanced cloaking technology, though it did not broadcast a signal. It was a government satellite that detected the craft, and when specialists identified that they had detected technology used by minus our primary government contractor, NASA immediately sent a recovery team to the ocean site. That was as much as I knew until Dr. Parker knocked on my door. I'd appreciate your input, he said. Pardon, I replied, fearing for a moment that I'd have to join the exploration team. You're one of only 24 people who were involved with the GE-1 project, Parker explained as if that were enough information. I don't understand. That project ended a year ago, I said. Dr. Parker's brow furrowed. Please come with me, Dr. Odell. And then, after following the man to the control room, I learned something which my brain, usually eager to embrace the unknown, wanted so desperately to unlearn. On the ocean floor, thousands of feet below the water's surface, NASA found the GE-1 spacecraft. What? I gasped. We don't know, Dr. Parker replied. I need your help though. Why? I weakly asked. I don't understand any of this. The GE-1 is sitting in a hangar, isn't it? Yes, Dr. Parker nodded, but it's also sitting at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, 3,000 miles off the east coast. My face whitened, and the man nodded. Take your time to process that, he said. I'm still working on wrapping my head around it. After a minute or so, I finally summoned a question that I didn't find utterly foolish or uneducated. It's the exact same spacecraft, identical in every way, I asked. The project leader sighed. Well, yes and no. Why am I here, Dr. Parker? I asked. The recovery team has not explored the craft yet, the man replied, but we have conducted a preliminary exploration with an unmanned vessel, UV-7. Movement was detected within the craft. Christ, I gasped, and Parker continued. It's unsettling. The room is divided. Some specialists think a living organism might be down there, but others think it may have been a dislodged piece of equipment. The UV-7 didn't transmit any biological information. Anyway, that's why I wanted to bring you into the room. You're one of this organization's leading biologists, after all. I scoffed. I specialize in cell and molecular biology. This is... well, what is this? What have we even found here? And Shade. Nothing, Parker said. That's my verdict, but Dr. Long disagrees. I mentioned your name to them, and I'm hoping you'll help me. How? I asked. By proving what the UV-7 has already told us, he answered. Whatever moved down there, it wasn't living. It wasn't organic in nature unless a fish happened to... No, it couldn't have been. As I said, the UV-7 would have detected a biological signal. I agreed to offer my opinion. I shouldn't have done so, but I did. It would have been easy to ask Dr. Parker to choose someone else. Give someone else clearance. I wasn't exactly emotionally invested in the GE-1 program. It had been a year years since the astronauts supposedly returned, and we'd found nothing at the source of the 784A frequency. Since then, I'd moved on to bigger and better things. Of course, everything changed when Parker revealed that an identical version of the GE-1 spacecraft existed at the bottom of the ocean. It was a discovery far beyond anything I'd experienced during 13 years at NASA. I needed an answer to the unknown. 2 hours later, with no more than 20 people in the control room, we watched live footage of the submarine's dive towards the GE-1 crash site. The mission was a joint venture between NASA and a privately contracted company, with all participating crew members legally bound to an NDA. After all, they were about to explore a spacecraft which, in the public realm, did not exist. After the initial flurry of breathtaking aquatic species, it took another 2 torturous hours for the video feed to display anything other than blackness. The vessel descended into the depths of the ocean, the part that light didn't reach. I thought about its similarity to space. I found it ridiculous to think about the fact that we have ignored a frontier on our own planet before exploring the one beyond it. So much of the ocean remains unexplored. Eventually, the contractors found the wreckage, and 2 divers, each fitted with a camera, left the submarine to explore the vessel. When they rounded the battered nose of the spacecraft, mission control fell silent. We all saw it at the same time. The bold letters printed on the crumpled wreckage of the sunken craft, which was half buried in the black seabed: GE-1. Hearing about the discovery was one thing. Seeing it on a gargantuan screen was something else. Dr. Parker was no liar. I knew that, but I still didn't believe him until I saw the footage for myself. "Breaching the airlock now," the lead diver, Barton, announced. Disturbed water swirled into a stream of bubbles, clouding the lens of Barton's camera as he used a piece of specialized drilling equipment. It was a long and arduous process, during which Mission Control only had a limited view of the spectacle through the camera of Lee, the second diver. "That'll do it," Barton's colleague said. The bubbles started to disperse as the drill ceased, and we watched the 2 explorers break the airlock's mechanism before pulling the hatch towards them. They revealed a void within the opening, and the lights on their headsets did very little to illuminate the innards of the craft. I sensed that the 2 men were apprehensive about entering the wreckage. They likely knew very little about NASA's GE-1 program. That, in the end, was for the best. We all longed for that privilege. Entering the vehicle, Barton uneasily said. The lead diver swam through the opening, followed a couple of seconds later by Lee, who may well have been on the verge of turning and retreating to the submarine. The split screen revealed 2 pieces of footage, barely different in perspective, 2 views of the same bleak, water-filled tunnel, the entrance to a vessel that had once traversed space, only to meet its end in a watery grave. "Are we broadcasting clear footage?" Lee asked. "Yes," Dr. Parker responded. "If you follow the main hallway, you'll reach GE-1's flight deck." "Not seeing any obstructions," Barton said. "Should be manageable." The pair continued to swim through the hallway of the craft, which, as Barton had noted, was remarkably intact. None of the carnage and chaos we'd expected to find. Then again, we shouldn't have been surprised. There were minimal tears in the exterior of the craft. Given the level of investment placed into developing a vessel far beyond mankind's perceived capabilities, it seemed plausible that the craft had mostly survived both a dangerous re-entry and a high-speed collision with the water. What did not seem plausible was Parker's explanation that we were looking at a carbon copy of an existing spacecraft, one which I'd watched land on Earth a year earlier. I had no reason to believe that everybody in the room had to be lying to me, but something in my brain refused to compute such an impossibility. I wouldn't have ever believed Dr. Parker, even if I'd gone to the hangar and physically seen the craft in person before swimming to the bottom of the ocean to view its twin. Even after everything I've seen, I still try hard not to believe any of it. "Oh Jesus," Barton cried. It only took a second for the camera to reveal what the diver had seen, the hellish scene that had sparked such a haunted response, and I unleashed a similar yelp of terror. We all recoiled fearfully. In fact, I suppose none of us had hypothesized what we might find in the wreckage, even when the debate about movement and biological signatures had raged. There was no joyous hysteria. This was not like those early days of the GE-1 project. Nobody seemed exuberant to find 3 floating spacesuits at the front of the spacecraft. Spacesuits that were not empty. Spacesuits that were surprisingly intact. It had taken roughly a day or so since the GE-1 crash for the divers to breach the vessel. 24 hours for the bodies to decompose underwater. The skin of each astronaut was discolored and wounded with haunting, razor-thin gashes, but their gaunt faces were unmistakable. The 2 men and 1 woman, each wearing a scream to the grave, were the 3 astronauts who had returned to Earth 1 year earlier. Worst of all was the corpse of Commander Tim Irwin. The upper half of his helmet and the head within had been cleanly severed above his gaping mouth. That explained the rotten nature of his remaining lower half, in comparison to Diane's and Olsen, who were each encased in a suit without oxygen. The ship's oxygen would have lasted at least a month or so, resulting in partial decay of Irwin's remaining face, exposed by the savagely sawn helmet. The lower half of his face bore holes in the cheeks, revealing teeth behind. One scientist murmured that the 3 scientists may have died long before impact. Within a sealed spacesuit lacking oxygen, the decomposition process would be slowed. Of course, that only raised more terrified questions. One in particular played on my mind. Why were the astronauts wearing suits inside the spacecraft? A technical engineer gave a probable explanation for the ship's return. The GE-1 was programmed with a homing initiative. In the event of life loss, or 24 hours without manual piloting, the craft's motherboard was programmed to assume automatic control of GE-1 and steer it back to Earth. The re-entry might have failed because the ship was damaged. That might also explain why we didn't receive a signal from its transmitter. Honestly, it's a miracle that the GE-1 made it back to Earth at all, the engineer said. We'll know more when we look at the ship's log, another engineer added. Dr. Parker sighed. Barton, we have to get out of here, Lee yelled, shouting over Dr. Parker. I didn't sign up for this. Look, we did the dive. You've seen what you needed to see. I understand that this is a terrible situation, Parker continued. You were, however, briefed. You signed a contract, Mr. Lee. The nature of the expedition was made clear to you, and we don't have all of the information that we need. We need you to recover as much of the ship's data as possible. Do you have the drive? Yes, Barton murmured, dazed by the 3 floating corpses. Right, Parker replied. You should see the socket on the right-hand side. The lead diver swam towards the main console, searching anxiously with the navigational assistance of every expert in the room. When he finally inserted the drive into the designated socket, a red light flickered beside it. What does that mean? Barton asked. You were right, Ian, one of the technical engineers said to his colleague. It's not good, Mr. Barton. It means that some of the ship's log files are corrupted. All of them? Dr. Parker asked. The engineer rubbed his chin. Well, if there'd been no light at all, this would have been a lost cause. So there's still hope. It'll be the water damage. No doubt about that. Just leave the drive in the socket, Mr. Barton. Let it run. When the light turns off, that means the data transfer has finished. Meanwhile, Lee was scanning the ship with equipment for detecting organic matter. I was standing by, waiting for the diver's device to detect some sign of life, something that would warrant me being in the room. But there was nothing. Not even any sign of the movement that the UV-7 had detected. I was the uncomfortable biologist in the corner, only there, it seemed, to endure the horror alongside everyone else. Something that did intrigue Mission Control, however, was Lee's discovery of floating glass shards in Danes' laboratory. Most people wouldn't pay attention to suspended glass fragments in an underwater wreckage. The divers certainly didn't understand the commotion from the scientists, and neither did I, but Lee indulged Dr. Parker when he was instructed to collect a sample. It's just broken glass, I naively thought, frowning. 10 minutes later, when the data transfer completed, Barton recovered the drive, and the 2 divers were beyond happy to receive the go-ahead from Dr. Parker to leave the site. The men returned to the submarine, the transmission ended, and everybody in the control room dispersed. I didn't sleep that night, of course. No sane person would manage a good night's sleep after such an awful discovery. When I went into work that morning, I hadn't expected to see video footage of 3 dead astronauts. More terrifying than that, I hadn't expected to see footage of 3 corpses who I'd seen return to Earth, alive and well. Earl, Dr. Parker half barked. I was sitting in my office, boring into the wall with a 1,000-yard stare. It took the man 3 attempts to catch my attention. Using my first name had triggered something in my brain, taken me out of myself for a moment, reminded me that this was all real. No matter how hard I tried to dissociate and detach myself, I was excruciatingly intertwined with the horror. Dr. Parker, I replied, unable to say anything else. I'm afraid I have to ask you once again to come with me, the man said, seeming far paler than usual. We just reviewed the data from the GE-1 wreckage. What did you find? I whispered, voice breaking. Parker sighed. If you come to my office, you'll see. I really need your opinion. That seemed like a lie to me. Dr. Parker had been talking about the importance of my opinion as a biologist since the start of the GE-1 program. In the end, I'd simply been a limp, lifeless limb. Hardly even a backup appendage. Just some excess fat that somebody had forgotten to trim. As it would transpire, however, Dr. Parker had finally found something that required my input. Out of 102 audio files on the drive, only 2 were uncorrupted, 2 recordings from Commander Tim Irwin. Within those recordings, Dr. Parker heard something he didn't understand, heard many things he didn't understand. Unfortunately, I scarcely understood the recordings either. What little I did understand, however, horrified me, and I saw that coming. It was foreshadowed by the project leader, by his haunted eyes. The board need to know whether they found something alien in nature, Dr. Odell. I still don't think it's not organic. I don't believe that. They won't listen to me, Dr. Parker said, but they'll listen to you. I could tell that the man no longer believed his own words. He wanted me to prove him wrong. File 86. This is Commander Tim Irwin. I am recording this message at 1440 on Thursday, 2nd February 2023, Greenwich Mean Time. Since 12:15 today, we have been unable to contact Mission Control. Olsen has not pinpointed any malfunction, so we hope that all remains well back home. The 3 of us are contemplating the possibility that the issue with our broadcasting signal stems from what we have discovered, the source of the 784A frequency. We found it, and given what we have experienced over the past 2 hours, I believe it to be vital for me to record our findings in the absence of any communication with Dr. Parker. At roughly 12:35, shortly after losing contact with home, we finally saw a physical manifestation of the frequency that we've been hunting for 8 days. We were starting to think there would be nothing there. We'd been eyeing blackness for hours, believing that the transmission had no visible source. It was when we neared a mile or less from the signal source that we finally saw something tangible. I'm still struggling to describe our discovery. Well, at first we didn't know how to put it into words. Now, however, I suppose I'd say that we were pursuing an ever-moving belt of glass shards. Yes, glass shards. You heard me correctly. Thousands of small, glass-like fragments hurtling through the cosmos. Jagged pieces of some unknown material. No sign of biological life, no sign of foreign technology. Just a near-transparent substance with no technological or organic nature, somehow transmitting the 784A frequency. That revelation might disappoint some people back home, those hoping for signs of alien life. Still, I know that Dr. Parker and other minds behind this mission will be extremely fascinated by this discovery. At 12:55, after a brief preparation period, we used the B1 craft to retrieve a sample of glass from the moving belt. I understand that, though we were cleared to use the equipment without approval, Dr. Parker may be a little disheartened. I know he wanted to experience this with us. I just hope he'll understand. We didn't want to wait for the line of communication to reopen. After all, we didn't know whether we'd have another opportunity. We had no way of knowing how the mysterious belt of glass would react to our presence, even though GE1 still wasn't picking up organic or electronic signatures. Diane keeps talking about the possibility of something sentient lurking in the shards. Until we detect something organic, I doubt that. The belt was and still is moving at a rather glacial pace of roughly 6,000 miles per hour. We will have no trouble pursuing it in the GE1. As I speak, we are trundling alongside the glass stream at a crawl. It stretches for hundreds of miles. Who knows how many shards are contained within the stream. With regards to recovering glass pieces from the belt, the B1 craft suffered catastrophic damage, which intrigued us. No form of glass on Earth would be powerful enough, even at such a speed, to tear through the B1's reinforced hull. That only confirmed what we already knew. This isn't glass, it isn't anything we understand. Upon realizing that, we knew we had to retrieve a sample. Regardless of the damage to B1, the small craft only managed to collect a meager handful of passing shards, but that was enough. We didn't want to push our luck, so we brought it back within a matter of minutes. I'll send over the data logs as soon as the communication is fixed. You'll see what I mean. The miniature vessel was almost obliterated by the belt, and we didn't want to lose an opportunity to claim at least something. At 13:20, Dr. Gianna Dianis examined the 7 shards recovered by the B1 craft in her laboratory. She instructed Olsen and I to wear protective gear before joining her, as she had no idea exactly what we'd found. We giddily watched Diane's conduct her tests. She was giddy too, in all honesty, though she attempted to maintain a professional composure. We're aware, whatever we've retrieved, that it is unlike anything humanity has seen before. Dr. Diane's confirmed around 1420 what we'd seen in GE1's data. The shards do not contain organic matter. Each piece is composed of a raw material not present on Earth or any other planet we've ever explored. Shortly before I started this recording, however, Olsen became a little jittery. He told Diane's and me that he saw one of the shards parts enlarge, or at least move in some form. It was likely a trick of the lighting, of course. Diane's took him seriously, but she found no evidence of any change in the material. I suggested that moving forwards we set up cameras to record the laboratory. Diane's and Olsen agreed. That'll ensure we don't miss anything. I'll send everything to Mission Control as soon as Olsen has figured out how to fix the transmitter, though he assures me that it remains unbroken. Bizarre. Anyway, interference from the 784A frequency seems to be the most likely explanation, but we're still unsure. I will continue to log daily updates. For now, the three of us need to get some rest. It's been a historic day, but we're shattered. None of us have slept in over a day. This is Commander Tim Irwin, audio file 86, terminating recording at 1450. I need you to brace yourself, Dr. Parker said. I snapped back into reality, having been fully immersed in the wonder of the crew's discovery, much like Commander Irwin. I'd almost forgotten the gravity of the situation, forgotten the terror that NASA had found at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Brace myself for what? The next audio file? I asked. Dr. Parker nodded. We just listened to 86. The only other uncorrupted recording is 99. So, we're missing 12 files in between those, I asked. Yes, he answered, and 3 files after 99. The board doesn't care about the first 85 audio files, the ones before we lost contact with GE-1, meaningless updates that would likely mirror whatever Commander Irwin was telling Mission Control on a daily basis. But the audio recordings from 86 to 102 detail whatever happened after the vessel went dark. Those are, perhaps, the most valuable pieces of data this organization currently possesses. Right, is file 99 useful? I asked. The doctor's lip quivered as he hovered his unsteady index finger over the mouse, contemplating whether to inflict such horror upon me. I wish he hadn't. Useful? That's an interesting word. I don't know, Dr. Odell. It tells one horrifying part of a story we don't understand, Parker croaked before clicking. File 99. This is Irwin. 99. File 99. Since the last few recordings, it's all over, and things were already terrible. This must be my 5th recording today. I'm sorry. Sorry for the backlog of files for you two. Oh, who cares? Why am I apologizing to anyone? Nobody's there. Nobody will ever be there. I'll be lost to space and, well, I hope somebody hears it. There's the protocol after all. The return protocol. I'm no engineer, but I remember Olsen talking about it. If GE-1 makes it back to Earth, I hope these recordings make sense to you. Whoever's listening, none of this makes sense to me. And it's even worse now Diane's is gone. She died at, I don't know, 2210 perhaps. It's Tuesday, 7th February, 2240. I'm the only surviving member of the GE-1 crew. You know how it happened. I just want her family to know that I tried to save her. Oh god. This all started with a reckless endeavor. We should have turned around when we saw the vessel outside the window. It's still there. I'm looking at it now. GE-1, an identical version of our spacecraft, eyeballing me from the belt, impervious to the racing current of glass. You know what? I'd like to amend my statement. We should have turned around as soon as we lost contact with Mission Control. This was written on the wall. Everything about the belt was wrong. We knew it, but we were drooling from our mouths like apes. Olsen's idea was smart. It was smart. It just wasn't enough. We should have thought about B1, thought about how the glass tore through it. Olsen promised, however, that this would be different. The belt was moving so quickly after all. He said the shards weren't as dangerous outside of the belt. We wanted to believe him. Maybe I still want to believe him. After all, I'm wearing my suit, even though I know it didn't save him. And it didn't save Diane's either. I spent most of the day trying to stop the bleeding, but it was awful. You heard it. You don't need me to tell you. I still hear her words, ringing in my ears. The things she described, the way it cut into her skin and then disappeared. The glass disappeared after hacking her face to pieces. It was so methodical and quick. So eerily quick, but not in a merciful way. Her dying scream will never leave my mind. Neither will the sight of that sharp shard, unbound by the laws of physics, slicing her face with clean, swift motions. A weapon wielded by an unseen force. I've locked the lab. That won't be enough, will it? It wasn't enough to stop. Oh, there it goes. That's why I wanted to record this. I keep seeing something in the copied version of the GE-1 spacecraft, gliding 100 yards away from the real one. I keep seeing movement behind the windows. Oh God, 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 God. No, there's no God, not in the I see them so clearly now, but they're dead. Olsen and Diane's are dead. Their bodies are still sitting in the control room. I'm looking at them and they're across the way, surveying me from the flight deck of the copied craft. What is happening? What is this? They won't stop looking at me. They won't stop, and I want to turn around. I want to stop following the belt. I've wanted to abandon the mission for days, but Diane's made a good point. After Olsen passed, she said that we shouldn't head back with the shards on board. We were just too frightened to go near the glass after he died. Without Diane's, I don't see myself solving this. I just have to soldier onwards, keep tracking things, keep moving. I'll record an update tomorrow, but I won't abandon this mission. Not until I talk to somebody from Mission Control. Whatever material we found, I don't think I should come home unless I get rid of it. So wait, do you hear that? That's what I heard before. When it happened to Diane's, when the glass moved, changed into something, I don't know. It looked like liquid, like a thin trail of water with a slight sheen. It crawled across the walls before climbing her suit and somehow slithering beneath the visor. I don't know how it entered, and then it started solidifying. She was running around, screaming, wrestling with her own helmet. Give me a second, I need to check the lab. Yes, there are fewer pieces of glass. That's the other thing. 4. There are only 4 shards. We collected 7 from the belt. There were definitely 7, then 6 after the mirrored version of the GE-1 craft appeared outside the window. 5 after we found Olsen's body in the airlock. 4 after it took Diane's. Wait, there were 4 after Diane's died. At 22:10, it's 22:43, and I only see 3 shards in there, sitting on her desk, but the door's locked, there's no sign of exit. Where did the 4th one go? Where did it go? I don't know how much longer I'll be able to wait. I want to come home more than anything. See Melissa, see the little ones, but that's exactly why I won't come back. It would be selfish. It wouldn't be right to let them live on an Earth with the risk of these shards. Stop looking at me. Both of you, stop it. What are you? You're not them. They're dead. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for recording all of this. It would have been better not to know, wouldn't it? It would have been better not to know. Commander Tim Irwin, audio file 99, terminating recording at 22:45. After the audio ended, Dr. Parker and I sat quietly, not silently. I could hear my own heartbeat in the quaking canals of my ears. I could hear the project leader hyperventilating, failing to hide a fearful murmur that sounded at the back of his throat. He'd already heard the 2 files, of course. I had no idea how he'd managed to maintain any semblance of professionalism. He knew what was coming, he knew what I was about to hear, but he said nothing, did nothing. I was crumbling from the haunting revelations in the last surviving recording of Commander Irwin. I hated Dr. Parker for involving me in the GE-1 program. Think about what we saw, the man eventually whispered. I looked at him without uttering a word, giving the scientist time to continue. Think about the body of Tim Irwin, Parker explained. What remained of it? I need, more than anything in the world, to hear File 102, the commander's final recording on Friday the 17th of February 2023. That was after the GE-1 landed, I said. He shuddered. It wasn't the GE-1, Dr. Odell. You know that now. I'm thinking about the shards recovered from the wreckage. What happened to those? I asked, gripped by a fresh wave of terror. Dr. Parker lowered his head. Scientists are examining the fragments. Dr. Zealand's team. Now you've listened to the audio files, I'd like you to lend your expertise in his laboratory. Right, well, I've remembered something else, I said. The video footage from the dive. Do you remember seeing the glass in GE-1's laboratory? I've hardly thought of anything else, he replied. Commander Irwin said in the final uncorrupted recording that only 3 shards remained, but there were more than 3 shards in that water. I quivered. Parker frowned. I don't know what to say to that, Earl. The shards could have shattered during the crash, split into numerous smaller fragments. I didn't believe that, not from the description the commander had given. These were sturdy, unnatural things which could change shape and state, not things that would shatter. Anyway, Dr. Odell, the scientist muttered, clearing his throat. Before we go to Zealand's lab, I'd like to ask for your opinion. GE-1 found no evidence of organic matter in the belt. Dr. Gianna Dianes found no evidence of organic matter in the shard samples. Given the commander's description in File 99, however, do you think that the ship's data log may have been wrong? Do you think Dr. Dianes may have been wrong? I sighed. There isn't enough evidence chance for me to give a definite answer to that question, Dr. Parker, not until I see the shards for myself. I regretted saying that I didn't want to see the shards. I wanted to run away, wash my hands of the whole thing. File 99 had filled me with a bottomless dread that I didn't realize the human body could experience. It haunted me. The thought of an unfeeling thing stealing one's form and then shredding that same person to pieces. The commander was right. It would be the worst thing imaginable for the substance to make its way back to Earth, but it was all over when the glass mimicked the spacecraft. The shards have already been here for a year. You're too late, Dr. Zealand said. That line snapped my mind into action. I had zoned out of the earlier conversation with the scientist, still trying desperately to process the horror of the past few days. It was nearly impossible to process something far beyond our world, something the human mind has not evolved to process. Dr. Parker scoffed. Dr. Odell needs to... Dr. Odell is too late, Zealand interrupted. We disposed of the shards this morning. I beg your pardon, I asked. The fragments were dangerous. The audio recordings made that abundantly clear. Dr. Long ordered us to destroy the samples, Dr. Zealand said. At that moment, Veronica Riding emerged from the lab, which was being barricaded by Dr. Zealand's hulking form. The sheepish woman was pushing a trolley of black waste bags, and she seemed to be trying to avoid detection. Regardless, hope sparked in my mind, as Veronica was a close friend of mine, not just a colleague. I hoped she would clear up the strangeness of the situation. The idea of NASA discarding such an important historical find seemed unthinkable to me. It was a lovely thought, there's no denying that. I wanted to entertain the possibility of the agency putting mankind's safety before mankind's progression, but I'm not a moron. Veronica, I called, is it true? What was that, Dr. Odell? She asked, stopping to face me. My body temperature lowered. As I eyed the face of my dear friend, I felt the shift. I didn't see a physical difference in Veronica's appearance as such. The shift in my fractured mind was more subtle than that. It was a feeling that whisked the contents of my gut. Veronica always called me Earl.
If you enjoyed these stories, please consider subscribing and liking this video. Let me know your thoughts of these stories in the comments below. I frequently talk to my viewers there. But anyways, I hope you were creeped out.
Just kidding. Stay safe.